Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. Listen, most of Bad Rep Book Club is about books or authors that have either super divisive reviews or are pretty much universally denounced or panned. This one is a little bit different. The mid to late 2010s were a peak time for young adult and teen fiction, all in dystopian settings. Your first thought's probably going to be Hunger Games, but we also have things like Divergent and Maze Runner as well. A lot of the most popular got film adaptations, just as the ones I just listed there did, but here's the thing. When a genre is blowing up, it's hard to know who's sincerely writing in said genre and who's cashing in on an easy check. See all the supernatural teen romances post Twilight. Twilight has so much of a effect on literature in general, which is insane. But anyway, I mean, the biggest in that dystopian genre was Hunger Games. And you look at the fact that even that was allegedly derivative of Battle Royale. She said she's never seen it before or read it before, but I don't really believe her, and I never have, but that's not a conversation we need to be having now. We're going to be here for a while. So when I saw the book we're looking at today while browsing the shelves of the charity book sale at my local supermarket, my interest was piqued. This gave me such a quick check vibe, and also, like, I figured I was going to be deep in levels of cringe. And, you know, it was £1, so I figured I could probably put myself through some potential rough reading for that. And it's for charity anyway. And it might not have even been that bad. So, welcome to the first Bad Rep Book Club of 2025, where we'll figure out if a book deserves a bad rep, or maybe if it's not as bad as appearances may suggest. And for this first foray, we'll be looking at The Gender Game by Bella Forrest. Let's start by giving you the blurb, so you have the first insight into this book that I did. A toxic river divides 19-year-old Violet Bates' world by gender. Women rule the East, men rule the West. Welcome to the lands of Matrus and Patrus. Ever since the disappearance of her beloved younger brother, Violet's life has been consumed by an anger she struggles to control. Already a prisoner to her own nation, now she has been sentenced to death for her crimes. But one decision could save her life: to enter the kingdom of Patrus, where men rule and women submit. Everything about the patriarchy is dangerous for a rebellious girl like Violet. She cannot break the rules if she wishes to stay alive. But abiding by the rules has never been Violet's strong suit, and she's tired of playing a game she didn't agree to. Now thrust into more danger than she could have ever predicted, Violet is forced to sacrifice everything in the Forbidden Kingdom, including forbidden love. In a world divided by gender, only the strongest survive. So, I just had no idea of the quality of book I was about to dive into. I hope you can understand why. Like, I get that it could be said for most books. You can read something, it sounds great, but a blurb can do a great job of polishing a turd. For example, I bought The Spanish Love Deception because I thought it sounded good, but the blurb for this just gave me no clue of the quality inside, and I couldn't tell the sincerity of it. Now, I'll say from the off, regardless of any other feelings I have towards this book, it is very clear that this was written sincerely. I feared the not like other girls lead and the word females being overly used. I also feared TERF type content, but that was not really apparent. There's inklings of not like other girl behaviour early on, but that doesn't really last, and it's not super overt, and there's zero TERF content to be found. Well, there might be, but I don't think that's intentional. We'll get there when we get there. My point is, I want to start by saying I figured pretty early on that this doesn't seem like a cash grab and a genuine attempt at a commentary on a a gender divide aimed at a readership who are going to be figuring that sort of thing out quite clearly for the first time. Like, yes, you may be aware of like the difference between boys and girls when you're a bit younger, but by the time you'd be reading something like this, you're wanting to get a little more in depth. But I feel like I've been on preamble long enough. So the first thing we're greeted with is a map of the world we're in. Now, usually I'd be celebrating this, but this map sucks. I'm sorry, but what does this map give us? Not to scale is kind of funny. Don't think it's meant to be, but there's just zero detail here. Usually maps at the start of a book are to enrich the reading experience and help give us a sense of perspective when talking about the distance between locations, or help just to make the place feel more real. But this just feels like it exists because books in this kind of genre often have maps. I would not notice its absence, and I kind of forgot it existed until coming back to it to go over everything here. It put me in an oh no feeling going into the book, which isn't ideal really, is it? I always try to be optimistic, but this wasn't helping me. But let's actually get into the real meat of the thing. Prologue. My sweating palms slipped against the handles of my bike as I cycled at a pace I hoped would not look suspicious. I tried to fix my eyes ahead on the perfectly even road and not keep glancing over my shoulder at the makeshift wooden trailer I was pulling behind me. We start with Violet, age 11, sneaking away from Matris, though it doesn't become clear why until later in this prologue. She does a pretty good job of remaining inconspicuous, even if she comes across her defence teacher, Ms. Dale. She has a good excuse for being out so late and being far from home, and is able to make her way to the public dumping site. And honestly, only a few pages in, I was relatively optimistic, especially given the whole map thing. The writing wasn't eye-wateringly bad from the off. It was pretty easygoing and stylistically pretty much what I expect for the age demo. So far, so good. When she gets to her first stop, a small hole in the wall of the rubbish dump, she unhitches the trailer and unclasps the lid, unveiling what, or rather who, is inside. Curled up in the cramped wooden case, knees drawn to his chest, eyes tightly closed, was my 8-year-old brother, Timothy. My eyes moved over to the mark etched on his right hand, the mark of a black crescent. The mark that had changed our lives forever. It took a few seconds for him to unglue his eyelids and realise it was finally time to climb out. His black hair clung to his moist forehead as he raised his head to look at me. His grey eyes shone with fear. And in introducing this younger brother, we get introduced to a couple of the problems I'll likely bring up a few times as we go through. One of them is more annoying, so we'll start with that. I know this is probably mostly a me thing, but why do teen, YA, and actually generally romance authors talk about eye colour so much when it isn't relevant? I get it, when you're up close to someone and everything, you'll notice the colour of their eyes, or like if it's irrelevant to a wider plot point, you know, look at Twilight or something like that. But so many of these books are so obsessed with eye colour and I don't get it. Maybe I'm just neurodivergent and eye contact is like not something I think about, but in the real world, are people paying this much attention to it at all times? Like, don't get me wrong, if somebody has like very striking eyes, like the light catches, maybe somebody has really dark eyes and the light catches it and suddenly they shine a lighter hazel, or some people when they have blue eyes, they're like blue. But his eye colour is never going to be relevant again here, and it's really not necessary to point it out. Like, his grey eyes shone with fear is the line there, and I'm just like, okay. Here we also see the early signs of Forrest's love for repetition with the emphasis. It's not a bad writing choice. I know I use it myself sometimes, but when there aren't enough other tools being utilised, then unsurprisingly the repetition becomes repetitive. I first noticed it while reading not too long after this, when they're approaching the river so her brother can escape to Patris instead of receiving punishment for being marked. 15 feet away flowed Vale River, above which hung a dense grey mist. The river was wide, so wide that the opposite bank was a blur in the daytime when the mist was thinner. And not to be a hypocrite and repeat myself, but to be clear, that isn't bad on its own. While I'm more of a pragmatic writer who'd likely just go with the river was so wide that the opposite bank, etc, etc, there's nothing wrong with wording it like this, but it gets dull after a while. I might have noted it in my notes while going over it, but I likely wouldn't have, that point wouldn't have made it to review if it didn't come up again. The two of them are trudging along the marsh looking for their cousin Cad, who's sneaking Tim across. He's late, but they do find him, and while this isn't the most emotional scene in the book, to say we don't know these characters too well, Forrest does a really good job with tugging at the heartstrings, even without that level of connection that always helps with getting at your feelings. Violet's doing her best to remain strong for her brother, and it's clear that she's been a motherly figure to him despite her young age, with the two of them coming here from an orphanage. Even as Tim left my grasp, every part of me remained holding on. A lovely little turn of phrase that kind of becomes the crux of Violet's motivation for the rest of the book. He is the most important thing to her, and she will return to him one day. That is her oath to herself as much as it is to him. But of course, things cannot go to plan. There are guards on the marshland, and given that Tim is just a scared little boy, he yells out to Violet for her to look out, resulting in them being caught. Cad goes overboard, Tim gets caught by dogs and also ends up in the water, which is the last thing Violet sees as the guards get to her and she's tranquilised. It's a brutal end to the start, and Forrest really taps into some captivating action, a recurring part of her writing that we will be covering more as we go through. It was clear that this book isn't made for me, but so far my issues were just personal gripes rather than any kind of objective problems, and I was optimistic. I had hope that this wouldn't be too bad, and it might not be a popular genre cash grab, as I had, like I say, feared going in. Chapter 1. 8 years later. Merrymount Hill read the sign hanging above the entrance of the Greystone Windmill. Facility for convicted juveniles. I wrinkled my nose, flexing my fingers around the handle of my tattered suitcase. I had no idea why it was called Merrymount. There were no mounts around here or anywhere in the flat land of Matris. Mountains were a luxury enjoyed only by our neighbours in Patris, and nothing about this towering brick building or the shriveled brown fields that surrounded it could be described as merry. Now, my instinct with this introduction was a bit of an eye roll, but let's be real. This is a standard kind of intro for the genre, for the age demo. It is a little bit clunky, but it's not bad. Were this in a book for adults, I might cringe a bit harder, but it feels like it fits in here. The slight clunkiness does, however, become an issue, especially in the early parts of the book while she's still in Matris. I would say a lot of this probably sounds alright when it's purely spoken, but in written form it becomes an issue. It's mostly because Forrest loves her parentheticals, be it commas, brackets, dashes. She loves the lot of them, and girl, me too. But you have to make them easy to process. There were parts of this where I had to read over it a few times and even say things out loud to make sure I knew what she was saying. Admittedly, I do got that neurodivergence in me, so I'm aware that this could be the issue here. But I've generally found that in teen and YA books, they tend to be a little more reader friendly in that way. Yes, I'm aware that this is a huge reason that a lot of adults turn to younger reader books, but my only thing is that I always wonder how people don't get bored, and that is a sincere question. Like, I understand more getting into things like graphic novels, because it's often more simply written, and you still get that benefit of not having to read things about teenagers all the time, especially in the romance genre. Oh my god, like, she's a bit older here. She's 19, and I think the guy she goes after is... I don't even cover that. I don't think we get the age of Vigo, and I don't know if there's a weird age gap, because she's 19, and... It's like, it doesn't feel like an issue, but maybe looking back... But we're nowhere near that yet, so let's go back to where we are. For a little bit of context, this is one of the many correctional facilities that she's already been in, and she's previously got herself in trouble, understatement, so now she's just got 2 years left, if she can behave herself. And I had better not slip up. I'd already rebelled against the court at the age of 11 by committing obstruction of justice, and after being convicted of womanslaughter, albeit involuntarily, via the use of a weapon, even if it was a dinner fork, a few years later, there would be only one fate left in store for me if I didn't get through these next 2 years without a first-degree infractions. It would be straight to the city labs where I would be put straight to sleep without further consideration. Obviously, I have no issues with parentheses as a bloody tool. They can be very useful to expand upon what's already being said, and to add fun little asides, but sometimes they can be bloody exhausting. Like I said, it is more of an issue early on in the book, but that's where you're most likely to lose readers. If this were happening more towards the end, it would still be annoying, but like, I've already got so far, so I might as well finish. It can work well, but paired with the complaint I have coming shortly, I know I would have called it quits if not reading for review. And if I'm honest, that's kind of a shame, because the book does pick up. Am I ever likely to read this again? No, of course not. And I'm not even likely to read the rest of the series either, but the stuff that comes up later makes me feel like I'm not mad for having read it. We learn here that the mark her brother got was that he is not suitable to be a man in Matrian society. He's too aggressive and insubordinate, so he gets shipped up north to the mines. At least that's what the people of Matris are led to believe. The mines are also not on the map from the start, by the way. Perhaps they're too far north, but... you know... Keep moving, Miss Bates, my escort said to me, nudging me in the shoulder. She was a green-uniformed warden, armed with a crossbow. A stocky woman, nameless to me, and about half a foot short of my height. First of all, a crossbow is an insane weapon to just be carrying around as effectively a prison warden. They have guns in this universe. I guess it is more visually threatening, though. Also, while we do learn later that Violet is rather tall, it was funny to assume that the warden is like if Sabrina Carpenter was built like Miss Trunchbull. Now, Violet's being shown around the mill, and it's all very Victorian workhouse, and during the tour we learn that Violet has been pretty well behaved for the last 4 years of her sentence, with a couple of infractions. She gets placed with a girl a few years younger than her called Josephine. Josephine with an F, by the way, so I kept reading it that way, which I can't imagine is the intention. And that could well be a common enough spelling of the name. But I've only well seen it with a PH, so... Josephine is pretty much a little orphan Annie type, rambunctious little redhead who I thought for sure was going to, like, die or get seriously hurt for a plot point, but I was proven wrong. I figured her death would be used as a character growth moment for Violet, but no. She is still integral for how the plot moves forward, but not quite in the way I expected. When Violet is in the bathroom, she sees a girl she knows from a previous correctional facility. This girl named Vera Sykes. The two of them have had trouble in the past, though Violet has been able to not take it beyond having an issue with her. We also learn that Vera is the type to suck up to the biggest and baddest girl around, so she's protected and can get away with being a little shit to her fellow inmates. It's kind of like that guy, Jack, whatever he's called. He crashed his car like a few months ago, and it was like a supercar. He's an IRL streamer. Jack Doherty. You know when he, like, goes up to random people in the streets, starts shit, and then just hides behind his massive bodyguard? That's what Vera Sykes is. Violet gets back to her room, introduces herself properly to Josephine, and we learn how she ended up being incarcerated. I'd assumed it was just the stuff with her brother, but not so. It had been a sticky Monday afternoon. I'd been 14 years old when a girl 2 years my senior, whom I'd had a history of discord with, had picked a fight with me in the dining hall because I'd objected in no timid words to her jumping the line. We'd started with bare hands and would have continued that way if she hadn't scooped up a fork. I'd reciprocated to ward her off, not to plunge the fork in her throat, but she had launched at exactly the wrong moment and at exactly the wrong angle. She died in the hospital a few hours later. So here's the thing. My early assumption was that her incarceration was because of her trying to ship her brother off. So her constant complaining about being incarcerated made so much more sense to me. While it is a crime, there's reason for her to feel justified in her actions. And look, I get that incarceration is hardly going to be a walk in the park, but I mean, this is a very simple crime. Like, this is just crime and punishment. Like, no matter your intentions here, you did very much kill that girl, and that's also point one on her kill count, by the way. Keep that in mind for later. Josephine is there because she and her mother attempted to flee Patras due to life there being not exactly conducive to any kind of joy as a woman, unless you're like just pearly things. Think fundy Christian vibes like the Duggars or Girl Defined, and like Duggars in their peak rather than sort of now where a lot of things have changed. Absolutely mad that Josephine is incarcerated, but that's not a writing critique. It fits in perfectly well with the world building, but it's just like, good lord, that's a child. At least Violet's a teenager. Oh, right, yeah, we're at the exposition dump. Listen, exposition is an integral part of world building, but there's only so much I can take at one time, and there are certain genres that really suffer with it as a frequent problem. Fantasy, sci-fi, and dystopian fiction are the three that spring to mind, with historical fiction occasionally having to deal with it as well. I get it, you have to bring the reader up to speed on this brand new world, or the way this world is somewhat different from the one you're used to, but please stop doing it in one big chunk. It disrupts the narrative, and I feel like I'm wading through treacle trying to get back to where I need to be. Little blocks of backstory are fine, but this is about 4.5 pages worth of pure info dump, and I'll be honest, a lot of it is kind of redundant. We do need a little setup for the history, given that Violet will be headed to Patras later on, but we can learn some of that when she arrives. We don't need this all at once. So, to summarise, women are basically pets in Patras, no rights and wholly reliant on men. Men in Matras are under scrutiny almost constantly to make sure they're not a risk to the system. Basically, that they're not aggressive, or typically sort of the idea of a big masculine man. They can't be like that, and they can't be hyper masculine, as it were. Hookups between sides aren't common, though why we need to know that is beyond me. I guess it kind of fits in that it's like, oh, people do meet each other, but that's not what hookups are. Like, it's not just meeting someone from the other side. Most matrian women elect to be single and have children via IVF or similar methods. There is a new king in Patras. He's called Maxon. He's piling a huge amount of funds into developing a drug that anesthetized emotions while sharpening logic and intellect. Yes, we're still going. Centuries ago, the two nations didn't exist and were one group of a war that toxified America. Patras is basically what used to be Appalachia, therefore very mountainous. Matras is flatlands. I'm not sure what that means for real geography. Like, I barely know UK geography, so don't expect me to know about America. I don't know where Matras would be if it's right next to the Appalachian Mountains, but not in Appalachia. I just know that that place is full of weird cryptids, and like spooky stuff. I don't know much beyond that. After a time, a divide begins to rise while civilization is being rebuilt. Many women are realising that they're basically trying to rebuild the patriarchy and aren't really big fans of that, so there's a split. We learn that the first queen of Matris was Daphne the First, and soon after, the first king was appointed in Patris, whose name slipped my mind. If you're going to give us a history lesson, then give us the details. We've already been here long enough, and I get that Matrian history is what's ingrained in Violet's head, but that's something she'd know. The Matrians adopted the screening of males relatively quickly, and as far as everyone is aware, the marked ones get sent to the mines in the north. This is what happened to Violet's brother. And that's your summarised info dump. Be glad it takes up as little space as it does, because fuck me did it drag in the actual book itself. And with that last part, I did have a moment of wondering, oh, why don't they just send the marked boys to Patris, but then very quickly realised this would only encourage the unwanted behaviour. Also, this only becomes more apparent as the book goes on, but I'm not surprised Tim got marked, given how aggro his sister is. This girl loves a fight, no matter if it's in self-defense, pure aggression, or actual martial arts. There is some genetic factor with this lot. Chapter 2. Everyone is awoken by the morning alarm at the delightful time of 4 a.m. After washing and dressing, Josephine and I followed the crowd milling down the hallway, heading for the staircase. I spotted Vera up front, standing next to the largest girl among us. The girl's hair was so short and her build so wide, one could have easily mistaken her for a man from behind. Oh, the fear that ran through me when I read that last line, but thankfully, I don't recall any kind of like homophobia or transphobia in the upcoming scenes with her, not even like subtle digs. I just always get tense when the image of a woman is like being mannish in a book like this. And sure, she's a bully, but the short hair means there's less to grab in a fight, and if you've seen girls fight, you know that is a common tactic. And her having a big old wide body is probably an advantage for her being aggressive. The hair pulling thing always gives me flashbacks. Man, there was a fight between two girls when I was at school where one of them got her hair pulled and she had extensions in, but like she was falling to the floor and the other girl was still holding her hair, and like she mostly ripped out extensions, but the chunk that came with it was also had a bit of scalp on it. Oh, anyway, Violet gets shown what her job is and steadily gets on with work until breakfast, where she spots Dina intimidating Josephine. So despite vowing to keep her head down, she heads over to the two of them to help out. I don't fault her though, that's her roommate, and she is a girl much younger and smaller than Dina. I do have some issue with this, however. This was the first time I'd seen her face up close. Her eyes were small and spread too far apart to be attractive. Their colour dark brown, almost black. Her forehead hung low and metal braces glinted against her teeth. You know the villains don't have to be ugly, right? It's so commonplace, especially in stuff for younger readers. Just meaning non-adult, I don't mean younger readers, like for little children. And it's just like, is it really necessary? Like, I get why people do it. It physically represents the inside of a person, but it always just gives me the ick. Like, I guess the break from a Regina George type is kind of welcome, but let me tell you, it was often girls who cared deeply about a hyper-feminine appearance who got into the nastiest of fights. A very particular brand of femininity, but femininity nonetheless. But anyway, Violet gets Dina to back off without altercation, but it's clear that this isn't the last time these two will have troubles. We learned that it was after Tim was taken to the mines that Violet's quickness to anger became a real issue, even having to be medicated for her emotional outbursts at times. I believe it. She was 11 when that happened, so a traumatic event followed by puberty is going to send your emotions haywire, and for her that manifested with anger and aggression. And clearly there is something in the family, like I said, with her brother being marked as being aggressive, so there's probably something there. She has a bit of a heart-to-heart with Josephine while they work. I wish I could be brave and tough like you, Josephine sighed wistfully as she dipped her hands into a trough of flour. You can be, I told her. It's about your mindset. Refuse to be browbeaten. Like this morning. You didn't have to hand over your bread rolls. You could have refused, pushed past her, and gone outside to look for a warden. So let me get this straight. You want this little 8-year-old girl to say no and push past a girl who's built like a boulder and probably about a foot taller than her, so she can then go to find a warden, meaning she'll inevitably be labelled as a snitch. Listen, I'm sure this is Forrest trying to tell her readers how to deal with bullies, but school rules are not prison rules. This may not be a prison in the traditional sense, but its function is the same. At day's end, Violet gets herself clean and heads back to her room, finding that the door is ajar despite having closed it, and Josephine would never leave it open either. When I pushed the door open, I saw Josephine trembling on the floor, her right eye bruised and puffy. Surrounding her were the contents of my suitcase, scattered all over the room. My gaze shot to my most prized possession. Tim's photograph had disappeared from my wall, and on my pillow lay a pile of shreds. The only relic I had left of my brother, destroyed. All this over some damn bread rolls? I know Dina wants to be like top dog, but good lord, get a grip, girl. Don't get me wrong, I buy it. Teenagers are petty little bastards, and I'm sure that only gets amplified when in a sort of confined correctional facility like this. But Josephine confirms that this was Dina's doing, and the heat of anger burns its way through Violet despite how much she'd really rather keep that emotion at bay. And I get that this is something always bubbling in her, but we have been at this place for 2 days, and she's already breaking her vow to keep her head down and stay out of trouble. An 8-year-old has been beaten down, and on principle that's awful, but I haven't had enough time to really connect to Violet, never mind her roommate. I really think this needed a little more build-up, especially given that what follows is the kick-off to literally the rest of the story. Chapter 3. Violet goes round the girls demanding to know which room is Dina's until she gets sent to the right place, and immediately lunges for her, kicking off the fight. We get a great description of the two of them grappling for control of the fight, and the fight scenes are Forrest's forte. They're always brilliant, if a little short. I wish we had longer fights, but most of them are kind of spur of the moment or self-defense kind of stuff, so quicker bursts make sense. But this is genuinely the easiest compliment I can give. I want more. But the two of them make it back up to their feet. I was about to close in on her again when, to my confusion, she reached into her mouth. When she withdrew her hand, she was holding the top and bottom layers of her braces. Removable braces. She'd managed to keep them from the wardens. My pulse raced as I realised what she was doing. She quickly broke off the smooth rubber seal at the end of each of the wires, leaving them bare and pointed. She then held the brace in each hand, positioning the wiry ends between her fingers so they stuck out like claws. I can't lie, I popped for that. That is some theatrical nonsense. I am very much aware of that, but I think it is fantastic. This was proof enough for me that Forrest was going to be really great with fight scenes, because she gets it. The regular fighting side of things reads really well. Everything is super clean and makes for fantastic action. And something like this just elevates it. I love it, man. At some point during the fight, they both end up with one half of the brace each. Violet is on her back, getting choked out, but she manages to wriggle out into a better position so she can use her legs, and does so by thrusting her knees up, causing Dina to jerk forward. This jerk makes Violet brace, herself with her hand. The hand holding the brace. Remember the reason that Violet is in this correctional facility? The fork incident? Yeah, that wasn't the last time she was going to end somebody's life in that fashion, because this knobber has gone and killed a second girl in almost exactly the same way. My assumption was that she was going to flee to Patris, but that's not quite how things go. And like I said, that's kill count number 2. Keep an eye on that. Chapter 4. The whole opening to this chapter is fantastic. Violet's in this head rush as Warden spill into the room and pin her against the wall so they can get Dina out before escorting Violet off the premises. She's put into a car so she can be driven to the palace labs. As far as she's aware, she's being driven there so she can be euthanized, as she's had one too many serious infractions. Instead, she's taken to an old grey building and placed inside a cell. She figures this is just a holding place until her execution though. Still, during the night, she's collected once more. She is, however, not being driven to the labs and is instead taken to the royal palace. And call me Mystic Meg, because I called right away that they were going to use her as a spy for some reason, knowing that she can handle herself, though I also called that she's hardly the most conspicuous girl in the world. Patreon women have to live that kind of keep sweet, pray and obey type lifestyle, and guess what? It's not really a spoiler to say she doesn't end up being particularly good at being the good wife. She's led into a sitting room where she's made to wait until... Then I heard footsteps. The doorknob twisted and clicked and a man stepped inside the room. A man I recognised. His hair was light, almost white, blonde, and his face sported a thin goatee. His eyes were powder blue, his skin sallow. His features were altogether so pale and fair he looked washed out. Gonna stop there for a second. Why give us the hair, skin and eye colour if you're then going to tell us that all of the features are so pale and fair he looked washed out? He's old and pale. Just say that. Move on. I had seen his face in the papers before. He was the only male consultant to Queen Vena's court, a scientist whose name was Alistair Jenkins, if I remembered right. Born and bred in Matras, he was the son of a member of the court and a distant relative of the scientist Yanto F. Jenks, who pioneered the methods of screening boys, the same methods that were still used today in the matriarchy. Once again, we have someone armed with a crossbow, as this is Alistair's choice. Listen, they're cool as hell, but it is such a cumbersome choice. Like I said earlier though, it's a pretty good intimidation tactic, and it works because Violet assumes that he's going to take her out here rather than at the lab. Instead, she's given a choice. Accept an opportunity with no detail until she accepts, or get the injection she thought she'd be getting in the first place. Those are her only 2 options. Chapter 5. She accepts. Death could be on the cards either way, but in this case, she may well live long enough for a reunification with her brother. Because of this acceptance, we get an explanation of her mission from Alistair. Recently, we had a break-in at the court's labs. My lab, specifically. Some valuable items were taken. Specimens. After a thorough investigation, we discovered who the thief was. Unfortunately, we had a snitch in our midst, a double agent bribed by Patras. She has been caught and reprimanded, and put to death without a doubt, but the damage has already been done. There is, however, one specimen that we believe is still salvageable, the most vital of all of them. It is the result of thousands of hours of experimentation and research. See, now that's how we use those beautiful little parentheses. It's quippy enough and doesn't disrupt the flow of everything quite as much as we've seen previously. He tells her that there's already one agent in place in Patras who's made good headway in being connected in all the right places, though we don't learn more about him quite yet. What is this specimen? And what makes you so desperate to get it back? My theory was that she'd get her hands on it and decide that nobody should have it and have off with it, which actually is remarkably close to the truth, but I don't know, maybe calling out a YA plot beat is maybe it doesn't take somebody as smart as I think, but I felt good about it. Also, asking why they're so desperate to get it back is so funny, because honestly, if something's been stolen from a scientific lab connected to the royal palace, it's probably something important and valuable to the entire nation. I don't hold out on Violet using what's rattling around somewhere in her skull though, and that will come up time and time again. While she isn't allowed to know specifics, all she does need to know is the visuals, and he shows her pictures so so that she can see that it's a silver egg, and he gives her an idea of the size, so she knows that it should be pretty easy to carry around when she's required to do so. Despite having been shown a map of Patras, told that it was Patrian agents that took the egg, and that there isn't already an agent settled within Patras, Violet remains surprised that that's where she's being sent. There are only so many ways I can say that she isn't the brightest button in the box, but I will continue to point this stuff out because it is one of the more grating aspects of her character and the book on the whole. Sometimes I can put it down to her still being a teenager, but more often than not, that isn't seemingly the case. The real kicker to her getting sent over there is that she has to marry the agent previously mentioned, because women cannot go about there without guardianship in Patras, and yes, to them guardianship and marriage equate to the same thing. While it's clear that a major reason that Violet was chosen for this position is that she's very capable of defending and handling herself in physical situations, I do think it's rather a bold choice to pick someone quite so conspicuous to play the role of a Patrian woman. She finds it impossible to hold her tongue, she's quick to anger, and she's already got 2 people on her kill count. It's a big task for a newbie, but I do feel for her. She's already spent a good whack of her life imprisoned, and she's well aware that life as a Patrian woman won't be that different overall. Knowing we were told that there was a love story in the book, I figured this was going to be a fake marriage to real romance type beat, or that it was going to be a love triangle between what she should want in a Matrian man and what she for some reason yearns for with a Patrian man. I was wrong on all of that, and I'm especially happy I was wrong about the second option. I hate love triangles. Chapter 6. She's shown a picture of her soon-to-be husband, though it isn't deemed necessary for her to learn his name yet. Weird decision, but okay, surely you want her having as much time as possible to memorise the pretend life she's going to have to make the impression she's lived, but what do I know? She's taken to a guest suite and left by herself for the first time in a long time, though yes, there are guards outside. She's exhausted, but sleep evades her. Understandable, really, given everything going on for her right now. She's ruminating on what kind of life awaits her on the other side of the river. And I knew that her mode of getting through this would be literally smashing her way through this. We know she's aggressive. The issue with us already knowing that the lights are on but nobody's home is that kind of has to be her only option. If we had an intelligent lead, we could get an interesting Stepford wipe type narrative. Play the role. Yes, sir. No, sir. Tee-hee-hee. You're so funny. Oh, I just love my husband. Yes, I cook. I clean. That's what I do. Haha. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, she's playing these men for fools. And, you know, we're actually getting espionage. But we are not living in that world. We know damn well that she is going to fumble her way to success of some kind. That's how these books work generally, but very specifically when you've got somebody as, like I said, unbright as this lass. While she can't sleep, she remains in bed until 8 AM the next day when she's startled by a knock at the door. Behind it is her old self-defense teacher, Ms. Dale, who we saw earlier. She provides Violet with some suitable clothes and shoes for training, as she's there to make sure Violet can brush up on her skills and learn some new ones. They'll be headed to the Green for their time together, somewhere clearly rather dangerous, given Violet's reaction, though she's assured that they'll only be there during daylight hours, and they're only headed over there for the next few days anyway. They're accompanied by a pair of wardens when they head out, because of course they are, but I had been hoping that I could be alone with Ms. Dale for the next 3 days, that she would be deemed enough security, but apparently the wardens still considered me too much of a threat. To what exactly? I wasn't sure. Autumn, you can't keep calling her thick. I mean, it's just mean at this point. Autumn. Look, all I'm saying is how dense do you have to be to go, I'm here after being offered an alternative to a death sentence, have 2 kills under my belt, and have been given highly secretive information. Of course you're a fucking threat. The state deemed you a threat by incarcerating you, and the information you have could obviously be used to threaten the security of the entire nation. The green is covered by a creeping mist, guess what colour, and is densely packed with trees. People do not generally enter this place. Those who do not often make it back out, and are often family members of the boys sent off to the northern mines. They have to wear breathing masks, and oh no, did Miss Dale only bring 2, so the security have to stay back at the car? Terrible. Were this woman younger, she'd have been the perfect candidate to take Violet's current role. Basic brain power in there. There's dangerous bugs and beasties in the green, but we don't get too much about them, nor do we need it. I'm not lingering on this bit too much, as I don't think it too necessary. The main reason for this training is so she's got firearms training on top of her previous self-defense. This not only serves the primary and obvious purpose, but it also puts her outside of her comfort zone. I'm not sure if her self-defense previously had her trained with any melee weapons, though we've seen she's certainly proficient with them, but ranged weapons aren't something she's had to come to grips with before. However, she does manage to quickly get to grips with these weapons, kind of remarkably quickly actually, which does feel rather convenient if I'm totally honest, but it's a small complaint overall. It's really not like, oh, she kind of learns them quickly, but maybe that's just something that she's able to pick up on. And it seems like she's just proficient with the technique, not like the emotional side of what these weapons can do. She's not suddenly turned into a stone-faced super soldier, so it's fine. I definitely had my comfort zone pushed, but once I'd gotten the hang of technique, it wasn't nearly as difficult as I'd envisioned. Wielding a gun had started to come naturally to me. That didn't make me any less afraid of the weapons though. Not so much of being shot at as afraid of the damage I could inflict with them myself. I had a hard enough time controlling my fists. I mean, hell, we've seen enough what she can do with a fork. Imagine what she could do with a desert eagle in her hands. She spends the next few days much in the same fashion, changing up the weapons and learning to use everyday objects to her advantage, which... No, I don't need to finish that. You already understand the joke I'm going to make. I could have sworn, though, at one point that I actually saw the shadow of a person darting through the trees, or some other creature that stood tall and upright. But it vanished quickly before I could even point it out to Miss Dale, leading me to conclude that it was the mist playing tricks on my eyes. I cannot remember for the life of me if we ever get a callback to this by the end of the book. Though, given how it ends, I can only assume this is something meant for the sequel. Because even at the end, I'm sure we never even hear about this mist cryptid again. We round the chapter out with Violet and Miss Dale having a bit of a heart-to-heart, ending with Violet receiving the warning to trust nobody on that side of the river, a warning well worth heeding, to be sure. Chapter 7. When she's back in her room, Violet is struggling to find ways to pass the time. After getting herself clean, she's greeted by a chambermaid telling her that she'll have company shortly, and she finds that this company is Alistair and Queen Rena herself. I must also press upon you one more thing, Miss Bates, Alistair ploughed on. Something that really should be obvious to you by now, since you seem to be a sharp girl, but it's important to emphasise all the same. Sharp girl? Where? Maybe he's being polite or even sarcastic. Alternatively, I'm just being a bitch. That's very much a possibility. That he's basically making it clear to her that they cannot risk a war. She must remain vigilant in her efforts and cannot risk being found out. This is a national matter beyond her or her partner. Your Majesty, I said, bowing my head just a touch. I understand the weight of this responsibility and what is at stake should I fail. For this reason, I believe it would be wise on your part to give me an extra incentive. An extra personal incentive. This would ensure that, on both a conscious and subconscious level, I will be making my best effort at all times. While that all sounds very fluffy, I can give the benefit of the doubt here that Violet is trying to sound all proper because she's speaking to royalty. She's putting her best foot forward, as her proposal is that if she is to succeed, then she will be able to visit her brother, and without argument, her proposal is accepted. We'll explore a little more later why this may have been accepted so easily, though for right now, Violet figures this is purely a case of them being as desperate as she is, and given they roped her into all this, I can't actually argue with that logic too much. Chapter 8. Look, I know when I'm being picky, and I know I'm always going to go harder on books I expressly know are going to be part of Bad Rep Book Club, but annoying repetition is still something I'm gonna point out, even when I know it's technically fine, just a personal gripe. For context, Violet is reading through the information folder and finds a photograph of a man and finds out this is the man she's to marry, and his name is Lee Bertrand. As I continue through the letter, I soon realised that Lee Bertrand was the man I was to meet on the other side of the river, the man I was to marry. Listen, I know how petty that is, but like, why do you need both of those things? He's the man I'm going to meet on the other side of the river. He's the man I'm going to marry. Yes, I think giving us one of those is, I don't know, it's just like unnecessary extras, but that's not, again, that's just me being petty for the sake of it. Anyhow, she spends time studying that letter, learning the fake backstory she has to upkeep. The details aren't too important to us, as she does pretty well at keeping on top of that side of things. You can also tell that the nerves of everything are really catching up to her. She's about to effectively become some stranger's pet, all for the sake of a nation that's kept her down pretty much her whole life, but it's still more ideal than how she could have been raised. It's all just swirling around her head until midnight, when Alistair comes to collect her. They get to the ferry and say last goodbyes and good lucks. I found it a bit disconcerting that there had not been any talk about how I would return to Matris after the mission. That was a bridge they apparently weren't willing to cross until we came to it. In this case, I don't think she's being straight up dense, as I often have in the past. Even on first read through, I did say that. Like, on my notes, I did say, oh, I think she's just being a bit thick here. But I think she does need to think beyond herself a little bit. You know, assume there are things in place and that she has the information she needs in that moment. She has a lot to prepare for without thinking of what's happening after it's all done, though it doesn't take too long for us to learn that she thought this was going to be a short-term mission, so trying to think to that endpoint for her isn't too daft. The journey itself isn't particularly noteworthy, and she greets Lee on the other side. We also learn his eye colour right away, because apparently that's important. I know I've talked about this, but eye colour is a fine thing to bring up if I haven't made that clear, but like, it's not just that. One, if it isn't important overall, I don't think I need to know. And two, if I do know the colour already, I don't need to keep being told. And any author I've come across that brings it up early on is going to keep fucking telling me, and it's so unnecessary. But on the ride back to Lee's place, Violet gets her first view of Patris. While there's a level of artificial, it is still rather beautiful to her. There's a level of opulence that Matris simply isn't afforded. Big city lights and artificial lakes make the place what it is, and despite herself, she does like what she sees, even if just on that aesthetic level. They get to his house at the foot of the mountains. Lee removed his jacket and hung it over a high-backed chair, revealing his true physique. It was slimmer than his bulky coat had made him out to be, but I guessed fairly attractive. During my initial note, I was complaining about this, thinking that I'd be stuck with one of those, well, I guess he's attractive, what would I know? But then it's super obvious that they're all like googly-eyed about the person that they're on about, but thankfully that's not the case here. She really is just going, yeah, I guess he's alright, and I imagine that does make pretending to be his wife a little bit easier. Their introductions are somewhat shy and awkward, which is about what could be expected. We get a little bit of a backstory on Lee, which becomes important right towards the end. My full name is Lee Desmond Bertrand, named Lee by my father, Desmond by my mother. I am 25. On paper, I am native to neither Matris nor Patras. In fact, I was born in the middle of the Vale River. Literally. My mother was fleeing from Patras to Matris to give birth to me, but timing was not on her side. Saying that later, while he officially pledges his allegiance to Patras and morally stands more with Matris, he has no true allegiance to any nationality. We know this from the start, and it only becomes more apparent if you keep it in the back of your head. It's a strong breadcrumb laid out to you. You know he has preferences but no actual loyalty, and this is brought back in actually a really good way from memory, but we'll see if I stand by that closer to the end. From what I recall, it's played really well that Violet would trust him and believe him, but I had my doubts and I couldn't put my finger on why, because I'd forgotten about this right at the start. Like, there becomes a point where I'm like, I'm kind of getting suspicious of him, and then you cast your mind right back to this and it's like, right, okay. He also says, my father's position was very beneficial to me, but I don't remember there being any clarification by what he meant by that. I assume his father was a lab worker just as he is now, or was connected to the royal family in some fashion, but I thought this would come up in a much bigger way. But maybe that's something we learn later in the series, but I don't want too much setup about a book I'm not reading. I always think the first book in a series should work well as a standalone as much as a part of the whole, and this does sometimes feel like it falls a little short on that front. He lapsed into silence, his blue gaze still on me. I'm sorry to keep bringing it up, but Forrest did it first. Stop bringing up his eye colour. Maybe if someone has really bright blue eyes, you might notice them staring a little more because it can be somewhat striking. I get that. I mentioned that earlier. Maybe I'm the one in the wrong here. I need someone who reads a lot of like pop fiction or like YA and teen fiction to tell me if that is something you enjoy. And I don't mean when the love interests are sharing any kind of moment, looking into each other's eyes or anything like that. That's fair. I mean this shit, where it's like the constant mentions of it without it mattering to the moment or the story on the whole. And tell me, do people go about their daily lives noticing everybody's eye colour all of the time? But he rounds out this chapter with one last reminder to Violet about her new Patreon life, telling her that under no uncertain terms can she tell anyone that he cooks for her. It feels like a little levity in a tense situation, though it isn't an empty warning all the same. Chapter 9. Lee knows that all the new rules are a lot to set on her at once, telling her that she'll be doing a lot of learning as she goes, but the basics for now are that if she's not with him, she is contained to the house and garden with the dog, frankly being on a pretty even playing field with her furry companion. It sounded like what I was used to, a prison life. I wondered how different my days would end up being on this side of the river after all. Is it a little on the nose? Yes, and I am almost certain that I came to a pretty similar conclusion earlier on, if not in the script, then definitely in my notes. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but that is a conclusion that I was sort of coming to, but I'm not too peeved at her coming to this conclusion outwardly at this point. We've discussed her brains, or lack thereof, so I'm not expecting a quick conclusion for her. And it being said out loud is like, yeah, that's fine. We're at the point in age demos where the showing versus telling scales are tipped more towards showing by this point, because you can expect a lot more of your readers, but there's still a fair amount of telling as well, because you are still writing for non-adult readers. This is preparing them to move up to regular fiction at this point. Lee tells her about tomorrow's plans. 1. Go shopping to get a bunch of what she'll need for a new life, including an evening dress for 2. The wedding. Very understated, it's about getting papers signed more than anything else. 3. Lab trip. 3A, meet the co-workers so she can get an idea of who's who at the lab. 3B, Most importantly, take a tour of the place so you can get a lay of the land for when it's going to be important. He pulls a folder out with about a dozen profiles, laying them out on the table. These men are those who will be obstacles in retrieving the egg from the lab. There seems to be one that catches Violet's eye. He tapped a finger on the photograph in the centre of the table in front of us, a photograph of a young man who looks more beast than man compared to the others who, although tough looking, were fairly well groomed. His dark brown hair draped down to his shoulders in waves. His forehead was low and wide, his face rough and unkempt, but he struck me as handsome in spite of his roughness. I was instantly attracted to his physical appearance, something I couldn't say in the case of the other men scattered over the table, or Lee for that matter. His deep-set eyes radiated a fierce green even in the photograph. Vigo Croft was his name. If it isn't clear enough, Drew McIntyre over here is going to be our love interest. She wants a rough and ready type who can handle himself. Good for her, and I have no issue with her bringing up the icon here. For all intents and purposes, she's checking out the man, so there's going to be a good chance she's going to notice that about him, especially given that it seems like it's mostly a picture of his face. All of the men before her here are the best of the best when it comes to security, having had the best training the country has to offer, Vigo being chief of this, of course. Chapter 10. The first part of this chapter is just getting us from A to B, perfectly fine, but there is one section that caught my eye. I suppose I could better understand the lure of Patris for even a Matrian woman now that I was here. If you could ignore everything else that went on in this place, the lack of rights and the fact that you were basically a prisoner of your husband, the land was beautiful. There was more wealth and resources to go around in general. The quality of life in a purely material sense was superior, even for a woman. I had yet to witness real Patreon society for myself, but so far I wasn't feeling as daunted as I expected. I really like the commentary on our own world here. Look at the world of tradwives, of fundies, all that kind of thing. The exterior is so enticing, and I'd be lying if I didn't get the allure. Unfortunately, I'm burdened with human empathy and a love of basic human rights, but I do genuinely love the way this invites the reader to make that comparison to the world they're living in. I'm always wanging on about wanting authors to trust their readers a little more, even before they reach adulthood, while Forrest's love of emphasis via repetition teeters on distrust. There are moments like this that raise my hopes somewhat. Sure, it's a pretty obvious comparison, were this in a book for adults, but it's not, and a little guiding is more than fine, and frankly, even if this were in a book for adults, I wouldn't stick my nose up at it. This is not set, strictly speaking, in our world. And it's a really nice comparison to make and like I said, invite the reader to do a little more thinking. The only mode of transport Lee has is a motorbike. Well, he has 3 of them, but point is, no car. That's all well and good for a man who mostly seems to be in workwear, but Violet is in a bloody knee-length dress and she can hardly ride side saddle. I just can't imagine that's comfy, and I don't think that issue is ever raised. Like, her just riding, if she's by herself, something like a moped, cool, fine, that works, but sitting behind something on either, I don't think we ever get to find out what kind of bike it is, but be it a sports style one or a Harley style one in a knee-length dress, I can listen, as long as it's a floaty skirt, I guess, and maybe you can do some movement to make it comfortable. But if that's a pencil skirt, absolutely not. I'm in a mini skirt right now, right? So it's a bit different, but it's a regular denim skirt. If I had to sit on the back of a bike with this, I could get arrested because of the way it would ride up. I wish we think about that sort of thing a little more, but it doesn't become important, so I'm just being petty. There isn't too much to comment on about her getting her hair, nails and clothes sorted, though we do find out she's allowed to wear fitted trousers when she's out and about. So progressive. Given they're not having an all-out ceremony, a traditional gown isn't necessary, but a proper evening dress is still called for and can be worn again if needed later down the line. She remarks that it's not for me, but nice, which is honestly really appreciated. A character like Violet could easily fall into the I'm not like other girls type, but we generally avoid that. She understands why others enjoy getting prettied up. It's just not necessarily her vibe. I know how basic that is, but for teen books, especially with this exploring the themes that it does, that trap is fallen into far more than any of us would like. There's no repulsion at the concept of a dress or visually traditional femininity. She's just never really been about that, and it tracks, to be fair. She spent much of her life in correctional facilities that all require a form of hard labour. Practical and comfy is how she's mostly spent her time. Like, so many of these books, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of girls who don't like dresses, but most of them can have an understanding of why other women want to feel traditionally sort of the idea of soft femininity kind of thing. Seeing that be the case here, that she actually understands why other women and girls like this, is so refreshing. The wedding is, like I said earlier, basically it's just a contract signing where she's quite literally handing over her rights to her husband, also referred to as a guardian, which is weird. Not from a writing point of view, works really well from a sort of world building stance, but at the end of the contracts we get another one of those, maybe this is a little on the nose, but it does feel appropriate for the age demo kind of moments. I hereby declare my full dependence on and submissiveness to Lee Desmond Bertrand, who will take responsibility for my speech and actions, as well as ownership of any possessions previously deemed my own. And with pen to paper, and an I do, just from Violet, they're married. Chapter 11. Lee gestured to my ring and said in a low voice, "Whenever we're out of the house, you should wear it. It's important that you have it on you at all times in case something happens. In case you get separated from me, you will be safe with that ring." I narrowed my eyes on him. "What do you mean by safe?" He began to walk me away from the building, back to the alleyway and other side of the street. "Let's just say there are some less than gentlemanly men here in Patras." I don't fault her for being somewhat clueless in this instant. In Matras, men are kept on a pretty tight leash. The freedom offered to the men of Patras allows them to partake in, shall we say, vices that they never get away with on the other side of the river. My fear was that we would be subjected to some kind of sexual assault scene later down the line. I checked over my notes, and because recollection told me that Forrest never takes it that far, even in the scene later on where that was likely to happen, and thankfully I'm still pretty sure I'm right. The concept is something absolutely fair to address in a book for non-adult readers, but my fear was being shown a more graphic depiction of it. I think teens and young adults can be 100% able to have conversations about it, but graphic depictions are already in a do we really need that type area in books for adults, so I'm very much glad that Forrest avoided it. While not really a critique of the writing itself, I will still voice my general thoughts on a little something from when they're back at the house. Lee is taking the dog for a walk, so Violet is exploring the house. She has a little look at Lee's room, not too different from her own. It's maybe a little bigger, but it's just as undecorated with too many sentimental... So it's undecorated with anything like sentimental trinkets or ornaments or anything like that. But what caught my eye was the fact that he only had a single bed. Fine for the guest room, but if you're going to pretend to be a married couple, surely you want to keep up the illusion a little bit. This never comes up, and it doesn't need to. I'm not here calling it a plot hole, as they never have the need to have guests over. Even if, as a so-called Patreon man, your wife is nothing but a homemaking baby machine to you, I'm sorry, but are you at least not trying to get those babies created on a double bed? This is just me getting caught up over something and nothing. Let's actually get back to the story. Dog walked off to the lab for meeting, greeting and touring. They're at one end of the reception room and in walks Vigo, not lingering on it, but his eye colour is brought up for no real reason again. Anyway, this is their first meeting, so first impressions are important. My attention was drawn momentarily to Vigo's hands as we neared. I know what you are. His knuckles were red and raw, like he punched someone or something one too many times without adequate protection. This might be the first time their paths cross, but it's not really what you could call a proper meeting. He greets Lee, he buggers off. Violet worries he disapproves of her, as you might, but she's told it's not personal. From what Lee tells her, Vigo is a bit of a loner who lives isolated in the mountains. As they're making their way to his co-workers, we learn a little of what's being worked on there. Most importantly, a drug called Benoxapan. This is what we learned of earlier, that anaesthetized emotions while sharpening logic and intellect. Human trials are beginning soon, though Lee wants no part of it. He shows her the room with the egg, but they don't linger around too long as they don't want to draw too much attention to themselves, so they head to the break room to meet everyone. We get names and a little small talk, but what's important is the newlyweds are invited to join the group for dinner that evening, and a little reluctantly, Lee accepts. When they get there, Violet feels mad awkward, which is fair because she just has to sit in abject silence being a good woman. Blech. There are parts of the conversation she's interested in though. One of the biggest sports in Patras is MMA, something Violet's never had the pleasure of experiencing. Contact sports, especially ones so violent, are non-existent in Patras, not even between women. On the one hand, I get it, all forms of violence, even in more controlled forms like this, are linked to patriarchal ideals. However, surely in those more controlled environments, we want women to be able to do, well, anything. Matrions are playing themselves by falling into traditional femininity traps. Not a plot hole either. This is actually a great and subtle part of Forest's world building. In an attempt to eschew all parts of the patriarchal ideal, they've landed back into certain traditional expectations. There's a lot of similarities to that mindset with TERFs. Stick with me. For years, feminists were insistent on showing that women are more than just their bodies, especially that they're more than just their reproductive organs. But then bring it forward to recent years where some of these women are trying to find reasons to justify hating trans people, trans women in particular, and they're suddenly actively going against what they've been preaching about for years. Suddenly what makes a woman is a vagina, its ovaries and a womb, and apparently that's it. Oh, and a lot of them act like if those things are non-functional for whatever reason, you're not a real woman. Well, they don't say that, but the way they insist that trans women aren't real women because they can't reproduce, don't have periods. Following that logic, if a cis woman can't reproduce, she can't have periods. That's not a real woman either. My point is, denying other forms of femininity that might traditionally appear more masculine, matriarchal society is effectively saying that real women are supposed to be soft and gentle. Yeah, they're given self-defense classes, but surely you want them to be able to do something with that as well. It's a really well done subtlety from Forrest there, and I do find it really interesting. While everyone's deep in conversation, someone catches Violet's eye. Cad. If you cast your mind back all the way to the prologue, Cad is her cousin who was meant to get her brother across the river. Now, he ain't gonna believe this girl for 1 second if she says she's a Patreon woman now and she can't risk her cover being blown. She tries to get out of sight by heading to the bathroom, but she finds that they're out of order. But now she can't make her way back out of the place without crossing his path. What a pickle. She panics, heads to the bathroom anyway, kicks off her heels and escapes out the window. Completely inconspicuous move. Realising she's now on her own, with no sign of Lee, she decides to head through the back alley that she's found herself in and make her way back around to the front. But of course, things cannot be that simple. I started moving toward the crowded street that ran perpendicular to the alley. I'd feel easier waiting where there were bright lights and people, but as I had almost reached the busy sidewalk, a group of men turned the corner. Big, heavy-set men with identical tattoos, a solid black square beneath the left ear. They had the rough appearance of farmers or manual labourers, sun-tanned skin, wind-swept hair, baggy clothes and clunky boots. Now, she has somewhat of an easy out here. Things might not be perfect and could still go sideways, but in this place she is the property of Lee, and flashing her ring to these men could easily tell them that what they want to do will cause problems. But no, once again, things can never be that simple. I glared into the eyes of the man looming over me, refusing to be intimidated. I could have flashed my ring to show him that I had a guardian, but I wasn't a Patreon girl, and I wanted him to know it. He couldn't just push me around. I could tell that my stand aggravated him. His arm shot out to grab my wrist, but I had already predicted his movement. With a sharp chop of my right hand, I knocked his arm aside and jerked backward. First of all, you're on a spying mission. Now is not the time to be a strong matriarch woman. Play the damn role. Be very demure, very mindful, and show them the damn ring. Second of all, I don't know why, but that I had already predicted his movement got me in the cringe bones. What are the cringe bones? Wouldn't you like to know? I don't know though, it's all a bit like shonen protagonist. Like, to be clear, it's cringe when they do it as well. I'm more like a idiot who can do cool shit kind of guy compared to the know-it-all brooder. And the prediction of his next move gives me more know-it-all brooder. She manages to get away and get a head start running away from them, eventually slamming into the chest of not Lee, but Vigo. Uh-oh, did someone say meet cute? No, not really. He's kind of abrasive, demanding to know where Lee is and why she's on her own. Weirdly, I didn't get the ick in the way I usually would when men behave like this in books. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I didn't immediately go, ew. Maybe it's because he's not playing up the big man and threatening to beat someone up. Any other book in this here little book club, and he would have rounded the corner, and even if she could defend herself, he'd step in and be the big man about it. He's just a little rough in getting her back to Lee, and it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, he's clearly a product of his environment, but at the same time, he's just kind of normal about it. Vigo cleared his throat. With due respect, Mr. Bertrand, I would keep a better eye on this one. She has rather an adventurous mind for a bakery girl. Vigo's green gaze rested on my face once more, then he turned on his heels, his long trench coat billowing in the breeze as he and his companion walked away. Chapter 12. So, Lee explains that a woman being alone in an alleyway like that is super dangerous, because the gangs like the one she just met are known to take women away, some place in the mountains, even married women. That, to me, feels really bloody convenient, given that earlier he told her that the ring would help protect her, but turns out not really, so it's fine that she went all badass on them, because they would have taken her anyway. Going back over this is opening up, a couple of more holes than I'd actually noticed in the first place, because I didn't notice that the first time round, and yeah. But when they're home, Lee concedes that things could have certainly been a lot worse. I imagine him doing so was because of a pretty mild berating he gave her on the way back. He also goes a little further into the egg plans. In a few weeks' time, there's going to be a big bash at the lab celebrating its 10-year anniversary. Perfect opportunity to go unnoticed, because they're just two people in all the hustle and bustle of the crowd. This is the event that the rest of the book is leading up to. She's a little disheartened to discover that it will be weeks rather than the days she'd hoped for. She's going to have to put on the good wife facade for a good while longer yet, and she doesn't have too much hope in her abilities. And don't worry, Violet, I'm right there with you. While, as she points out, security will be higher on the night, Lee has planned for this. I don't need to go into the minutiae of it. They need a distraction, and the distraction is going to be explosives. When triggered, the blast will be so destructive, security's immediate occupation will be simply attempting to get everybody out alive. I realised I had stopped breathing. So, you're saying it's probable that some of the diners will lose their lives in this? To which my immediate response was, wouldn't be the first time you've taken a life, but looks like Forrest anticipated such a response. Lee nodded, and I swallowed the lump in my throat. Having committed woman slaughter twice, claiming lives shouldn't be anything to make me flinch. But of course, those incidents had been accidents. These would be cold, premeditated murders. I wasn't a murderer, I was a girl with a difficult temper. My sister in Christ, if you'd left Dina well alone and learned to process your feelings, she'd be alive. Not premeditated, but after the first time, you knew damn well it was a possibility. Let's not play too innocent here. Also, he does tell her that there will be transport for the two of them on the rooftop so that they can get the hell out of there. This transport will be pretty important when we get to the end, so I'm just making a note of it here. But aside from the explosives, the major part of this is going to be who they have to pin all of this on, because obviously they have to get away with this. I'll give you 3 guesses to figure out who this is. Go on. Yeah, you're right. It is Viggo Croft. Of course it fucking is. Like, this isn't going to be a surprise. No, it's exactly who you think it's going to be. Chapter 13. So, at this point, I was approaching the halfway mark, and I wanted to check in where I was at. For the most part, I was feeling like it was fine. If, like, a little bit dull. I was bearing in mind that this wasn't strictly meant for me, given, the age demo. I was hoping for some improvement or things picking up, and I think I can say that that was definitely the case, and I can safely say that this is on the better end of the books that I've discussed in this series. Back to Viggo. Thing is, we know he's a loner, and turns out there's a pretty damn good reason for that. He was once married to a matriarch woman who found adjusting to her new life rather difficult, as you might expect. She stormed out one night because of an argument, and Viggo couldn't find her. While she had been trained in self-defense, as all matriarch women are, when she happened upon a couple of leery drunks, that skill worked against her. Just as we've seen with Violet a couple of times, this ex ended up killing one of the men in self-defense. I just want to step aside for 1 second. I swear, this cannot be as common as Forrest would have us believe in his books. Sure, accidental self-defense killings happen, but I feel like almost every time someone tries to defend themselves here, the opponent dies. I get it though, here it's like to make a connection to Violet because Viggo has a type, I guess. Viggo tried to ship his ex-wife, well, ex-wife feels a bit harsh, his missus, back to Matrix, unsuccessfully. He got 4 years behind bars for his indiscretion. She was sentenced to hang. So in short, yes, they're going to frame an innocent man because he looks like the most likely suspect. I'm sure this will all go over very smoothly, and there will be no moral quandaries about this whatsoever. He. They're going to need to start keeping an eye on him to make sure that they can make him look as culpable as possible and make damn sure that he's actually at the dinner in the first place. We learn here that he's a cage fighter, and a bloody good one at that. The security job doesn't pay him because of his record, so he takes on as many fights as possible to make sure he's getting money from somewhere. They're going to need to track him somehow, and thankfully, they have just the thing, so long as they can get him to take it. From the description, it looks like one of those gel painkiller capsules, and it contains an ingestible tracking device which will remain in his system for up to 3 weeks, and it's going to be up to Violet to make sure it gets down him. Chapter 14. Viggo has a fight coming up the next night, so we have to make sure Violet can get in there undercover, which means bringing out the drag. There are 2 iterations of her man look. with and without a torso suit, is basically like a fleshy type cover to make it look like a more masculine front. I think these actually exist. Like, I've definitely seen like the femme versions with like a lot of drag queens and cosplayers wear like the breastplates. So I assume there are a lot of drag kings and cosplayers that have like the male equivalent. As this is her first outing, they go no torso suit to start. She already has her height working for her, as we know she's pretty tall, and she's not like the bustiest lass in the land, so the bagginess of her clothes will see her straight for now when she's going to be in an arena where the lights are not going to be the brightest unless it is on the sort of the octagon itself. She also gets given a cap, which in hindsight is probably a baseball cap, but in my head, the outfits that the men in Patreon wears are all very like formal suits. I was always thinking very like 50s or 60s. So when they said they put her in a cap, I was thinking like kind of a bit more sort of Peaky Blinders, but unfortunately that wasn't the first place my brain went to. Like when they put the cap on her, it was like kind of Zach Dingle energy, a bit more than Tommy Shelby, but that's fine. But there is one thing that's going to give her away unless she goes completely mute, which is unlikely to be an option, but lo and behold, the land of Patris has a solution to that. So she just has to take Deep Vox. Swallow one of these and it'll deepen your voice for up to 12 hours. It's designed for men who aren't happy with their natural tone. Go deeper, last longer was the brand's slogan. Stay classy, Patris. We've already been told that almost every ad in this place has a scantily clad woman on the front, and this only helps to add to the overall vibe of the place. We know the old adage of sex sells, but it seems to be the only salesman here. There's a good bit of A to B stuff going on, so we're going to pick up where they're on the drive to the match the following night, where after going over the plans, she asks, what happens if I get caught? I'm like, first of all, don't, which is pretty much Lee's response. But second of all, you are a spy. Surely you understand that, like, you being caught means you're done. What do you think the plan would be? If you get caught, you keep stum about everything you know and go down with the secrets kept. Or become a turncoat. That also works. I don't know. I still can't see how Violet was the right choice for this mission, because an ability to defend herself is not at all enough to be able to do this. And later on, I do feel for her, because she has been thrown in at the deep end, but I don't know, like, yeah, there are expectations placed on her after only a couple of weeks that are quite intense, but this is pretty basic stuff. When she gets inside the arena, it's a lot less grandiose than she was expecting, bringing her to the conclusion that Vigo mustn't have taken his career to the big leagues. She quickly gets a chance to sneak to the cage. Vigo's match is up first, and the corners are both set up with the fighters' setups, so she can get the pill in his water. I did think it would be funny if he didn't actually drink it and instead poured it over himself, as fighters often do, but we later get to him with the water and he does drink it according to plan. I just think it would have been a good comedy bit. I can't lie, but I understand why Forrest opted out of that one. Vanguard, his opponent, comes out first, but the crowd is honestly just like politely excited about it. But when Vigo comes out, an explosion of cheers and applause. This is who they're here to see, and Violet is certainly happy to see him too. Vigo looked quite different in his role as a fighter. His hair was tied back, revealing the full breadth of his jawline. His physique was muscled, but in a more understated and, in my opinion, very attractive way compared to his opponent. Although their weight must be even, Vigo was taller, leaner, and I suspected more agile. His knuckles were tightly bound in bandages, and his shorts were plain black. Personally, I think a Mulan approach to this could have been very good, where Vigo meets and forms a kinship with the guy version of Violet. We could have had a real comedy of errors energy about the whole thing, but of course that overcomplicates things, so we don't get that. Boo. I'm kidding. what they actually form the relationship between these two really well, but I just think it would have been funny. This lot's version of Bruce Buffer enters the ring. The commencement of the fight was announced by the booming voice of a man whom I was sure must have popped a deep vox pill or two. Nobody's voice is that deep. I thought that line was fun. I'm sure most of us have heard the rich tones of ring announcers with like the bare minimum of having heard the classic
let's get ready to rumble!
She's never going to have heard that kind of thing, having never been at a sporting event like this, or likely at all, really. I just think it's fun. As we saw earlier, Forrest really flexes her writing skills when it comes to the fight scenes in both regular and sporting scenarios. I honestly just wish the fights were longer. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand that she's showing what an absolute phenom in the ring Vigo is, but I just wanted to be able to see more of Forrest's prowess in this area. Fight scenes are incredibly difficult to make encapsulating in text form, but I really love the way that Forrest does it. And as you might have guessed from that, Vigo was victorious, and rather quickly at that. While he doesn't stick around to enjoy the adulation from the crowd, he does get a good drink of water afterwards, so that's a job well done all round. Trekker in place, and he gets the winner's cut. In order to not draw attention to herself, she sticks around for a few more matches where she overhears people chatting about Vigo. Turns out he's been offered the opportunity to take his career higher, but has always turned it down, and nobody knows why. He could change his whole life, but he's happier here. The rest of the night is uneventful, and she gets to Lee at exactly the time they'd planned. Chapter 15. While debriefing Lee on the night's events, musing briefly how, if she were a man, then she could see herself in the fighting game, we learn that the Trekker is in place. We also learn that Vigo's not the only one with a Trekker, which will come up again later. We don't learn anything about the others being tracked beyond the fact that they've been useful to Lee, but we have to keep an eye on them, and when we get to the end, we can presume that the men named in the letter are the men here being tracked. But next up is for Violet to head to the gym where Vigo trains, once again in the man disguise, so she can make sure she not only knows what his schedule is, but make sure that it works for them to actually pin the explosion and theft on him when it comes time for the banquet. Her response to being told that she's taking this on instead of Lee is also just kind of annoying. Okay, another risk for me, but I understand why. Lee was more valuable than me in Matrix eyes. No, Violet, when you are in man mode, you are unrecognisable to Vigo. If Lee were to get caught doing this, he would be instantly clocked because the two of them know each other. Even in woman mode, you could play coy, but this way, you're a nobody. Violet's brains, or lack thereof, really are the major thing that brings this book down. Just like, ugh. Chapter 16. Given she's out in the day and going to be in a bright open gym, she does opt to add the bodysuit to the man look for this one. And when she's dropped off, she's told he should only be gone for about 45 minutes. Thankfully, the place is empty when she gets to the reception, so she can get to the ledger and note down pertinent times from Vigo's schedule, most importantly noting that he seems to be clear on the night of the banquet when it comes to training or fighting. Unfortunately, because of the lack of obstacles, Violet is done with her one and only task in about 5 minutes, obviously leaving her 40 to kill. She decides, don't worry, this isn't another thing for a kill count, so... She decides to explore the gym, given that there's nothing stopping her. Much of the gym is dedicated to fight training, so there's a plethora of cages around the place. Most of them are empty at the moment, but she spots one in use by a pair of sparring partners and watches for a little, but doesn't linger. She makes her way to a room with punching bags and benches, opting to sit on one of the benches, and after about 10 minutes, she messages Lee, telling him she's done. He responds, "Okay, stay where you are. I had to head to another part of town. I'll be there ASAP." Checking she was still alone in there, she heads to one of the punching bags and, well, does what one does with a punching bag. I don't know what to tell you, she hit it. The men she saw previously passed by to re-enter a cage, but they pay her no mind. She's happy she chose to wear the bodysuit, however, because she does need all the help she can get to pass herself off. A little while later, she gets another text from Lee. There's been a delay. Will be at least another 30 minutes. Sorry, keep yourself out of trouble. Which, in all fairness, she's done pretty good with that so far for today. But I wasn't holding out much hope for that continuing on. And honestly, by telling her that, I only feel like he jinxed it. I got distracted by the fight going on to my left and I kept glancing their way. I found myself predicting who would win, even though they had barely started. I figured it would be the shorter one, the man with a mop of ginger hair who was showing more initiative and daring than the other. As the sparring went on, I became more and more sure of my prediction. And then, the ginger managed to trip the other up and pinned his arms behind his back, holding him until he grunted in defeat. After 5 more minutes of sparring, there was an audible yelp. I could have sworn I heard the crack of bone. The ginger had injured his friend during a particularly frenzied takedown. The friend's right ankle looked bent out of shape, probably broken. When the man takes his injured friend out, presumably to get medical assistance, well, unless in Patriots he has to be put down like a horse, Violet enters the room with the cage and has a little look around, not entering the cage itself, however. She gets a buzz from her pager. Lee is still delayed, however, she doesn't have time to check anything else out. She hears the ginger man making his way back, so she slips back into the room with the punching bags. But while shadow boxing in the cage, the man spots Violet watching. After complimenting her kicks and commenting that he hasn't seen her around here before, well, he's addressing her as a fella, but I'm trying to keep this easy for you guys to follow, and for myself while scripting and reading it, so he invites her to spar with him, given that he's now missing a partner, and has a fight coming up soon. The sparring all goes really well, and there's something in it that's really empowering for her. While her sparring partner doesn't know it, the fact that this is a fighting partnership between the sexes feels incredibly uplifting for her. It's a fun moment that unfortunately gets cut short by Lee shooting her a message that he's outside, so she has to go. And, you know, things have been going a little too well for them, haven't they? And we can't be having that. So on the way out, she's on some winding stairs, and who could be on there but Mr. Vigo Croft? She's not in a position to really get away. She tries, but Grace isn't on her side, and she ends up stumbling down like right into him. Her fake facial hair starts coming loose, and Vigo peels it off, realizing who it is in front of him. She spins him a lie, telling him that Lee provided her with a disguise so she could partake in some of the activities she's used to from her matriarch life. Everyone is aware that's where she's come from, so it makes sense. She says that she's struggling with the adjustment to her new life, and that they thought something like this might help. Knowing that he's just outside, she says that Lee has been watching from a distance to make sure nothing goes wrong, and that she can take Vigo to see him, which is an offer he does take her up on. She's good at thinking on her feet here, I'll give her that. I've spent a lot of this review so far wagging on about how Violet is low-key dim, but in the moment here she does pretty well. And I could be pessimistic and, you know, yeah, sure, they probably ran over what-ifs beforehand, but I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt all the same. Like, given that it's Vigo they're working with, given his history, like, yeah, they probably are working with the fact that they know her playing up her matriarch woman struggling with the patriarchy. Yeah, it works, but she is very good at playing the role here, which is something that we've been worried about. But Vigo does say that he won't make a report this time, but if anything is to happen again... Chapter 17. When asked, Lee says he had to go pick something up, which will come up later. And though she omits the sparring part, Violet explains what went on in the gym and how she wound up bumping into Vigo in there and got caught out because of her facial hair. When they're home, Lee says that they can actually use the situation to their advantage. He clearly has a bit of a weakness when it comes to matriarch girls. My initial assumption was that they'd set Violet up so she'd enter... I'd say an affair. In Vigo's mind, it would be an affair because the marriage isn't. It's a marriage of convenience, as it were. But they were going to set up an affair with him, play on Vigo's emotions so he feels for her and lets his guard down so he's easier to set up. But oh no, Violet falls for him for realsies and setting him up hurts too much. This isn't quite how things go. They play more on the fact that he'll be protective of her, and it relies less on Violet using her brain. So she can just be herself for the most part. Now, the falling for him part, we knew that was coming, but we'll get there when we get there. They plan to meet Vigo again in the evening so Lee can lay out a proposal. Chapter 18. When that evening rolls around and they know Vigo is home, they head to his place in the mountains so Lee can get his plan set up. And after Lee knocks on the door, a bolt was drawn and then the front door creaked open. My lips unconsciously parted as Vigo towered before us in the doorway, bare-chested. He wore a pair of loose black pants and clutched in one hand was a roll of cotton wool, and the other was some kind of medicinal ointment. His bare knuckles were red and glistening. I actually kind of respect that she doesn't have the decorum to hold herself together, while thankfully never focusing on the fact that Violet hasn't had a huge amount of experience with men. Having spent most of her life in girls' correctional facilities, it is clear that this is probably the first man she's looking at and being like, damn, need me some of that. Almost every time she sees this man, especially if he's any kind of stiff undress like here, he catches her off guard. Like, here she sees him and has to pick her jaw up off the floor. There's no being coy about the fact she finds him attractive, which is really refreshing for any kind of romance book, but especially in a YA book. Even in regular adult romances, whether there's any explicit content or not, there's often that constant denial, even to oneself, that there is attraction, and I find it kind of dull most of the time. She already knows that there's physical attraction here, and as readers, we know that this will likely become more intimate and romantic as the book progresses. I genuinely really like how Forrest plays things out with these two. The proposal itself is basically for Violet to tag along with Vigo as he works, with him having temporary guardianship over her while she's with him. It's a way for her to get a better understanding of the way that Petrus functions and how she can better find her place within it. That's what Vigo is to believe anyway. He's also offered a good hourly rate, with Lee knowing that the only money he makes is from the fights. Though he seems like he might be reluctant at first glance, it doesn't take him long to accept, with the caveat of, I will back out at any time if things get complicated. And as this visit comes to an end, our gazes lock for 3 tense seconds. Then Lee took my arm and led me to the exit. Disregarding that whole part of timing it so precisely, because yeah, it is a little silly. It's clear that early on, Violet isn't the only one doing a little bit of checking out. The complicated line and the prolonged eye contact, it's clear that there's a little something bubbling beneath the surface. There also seems to be a recognition of kinship between them. Violet acknowledges to herself that it seems he may be a bit of a rebel like her. Like I said, Forrest puts them together in a really nice way. Chapter 19. It's their first day together with this new setup, and it's as awkward as one might expect. At least Violet is gifted the grace of a bar on the back to hold on to instead of having to hold on to him. Also, I wanted to find out if there's a name for that bar. I used to go on my dad's bike when I was younger, and I preferred using that bar too. It's comfier. But I never thought about it having a name. It's just like the backrest or the back bar or whatever. Turns out it's a sissy bar. At least, like, when I was looking it up, that showed up on Harleys, but my dad never had a Harley, so I don't know if that's got a different work on sport bikes, but you learn something new every day. It's called a sissy bar, and I think that's quite funny. When they get to the inner city, they wander towards Vigo's first appointment, trying to get to know each other a little. Well, it's mostly Violet asking questions, and Vigo is being remarkably dry, but we've known from the off that Vigo is rather guarded about himself beyond the surface level. This whole setup is so she can slowly chip that down and make it easier for them to set him up. The appointment they're headed to is an arms dealer that had a break-in right around the time that Lee just happened to be caught up before picking her up at the gym. And thankfully, I don't think it is ever confirmed that this was him, because, good. It doesn't have to be. This isn't a complicated puzzle. This is a bulky 4-piece jigsaw that makes a picture of a moo-moo cow. And if you need confirmation that you put the pieces together right, maybe do a little self-reflection. We learn that the crime rate is actually relatively low in Patras due to the severity of punishment. And the crime that does take place tends to be through organised networks, such as the one we saw earlier in the alley. They discuss the difference in the justice systems between the two nations, and Vigo comments that yes, he knows the broad strokes of how it works. Euthanasia versus hanging, corrective detention for females, jail for males, pseudoscientific screenings, murdering prepubescent boys, etc., etc. And that last part obviously had me going, as much as it does for Violet as well, because as far as we're all aware, they get carted off to the northern mines. This is what's supposed to have happened to little Timmy. Completely unaware of what's racing through Violet's head. He's just like, super casual, just, well, you don't really believe that mine bollocks, do you? And meanwhile, she's going through an absolute crisis. Her only relief is that he does not have hard evidence. But, as you'll recall, the big thing keeping her going through this is that she was promised a reunification with her brother. If Vigo is right, this is frankly all for nothing as far as she's concerned, but if she has hope to hold on to, then she will, because she needs it to get through this. While the doubt will always be there, she can't let it dominate her thoughts and has to move forward. This is also where we go, oh, maybe that's why the Queen was like, yeah, you can meet your brother afterwards, sure. And she's like, could be dead. The appointment itself is rather perfunctory, and Violet has to sit outside the fellow's office anyway. She does get little tingles when Vigo takes her hand to help her up, though, which is cute, and it's a little gentle act from the man who's still closed off from her right now, and is clearly, rough around the edges. It's sweet, it's quite cute. When they're getting lunch, Vigo is approached by someone who was at his last fight asking for his autograph. It becomes apparent right away that this is his least favourite part about being in the fighting game. He doesn't really respond when this fan asks, but when Violet does so soon after the guy leaves, Vigo explains that this is the biggest reason he doesn't want to take his career to the big leagues. Yeah, the money is better, but that isn't worth the loss of privacy. The recognition he gets in his current position is already deeply out of his comfort zone, and taking that to a higher level is something he could never do. Things are quiet between the two of them as he patrols after lunch, until he gets buzzed about an incident he needs to attend to. As they hurry onto his bike, we find out it's a kidnapping, but no more information for now. The woman who was the victim of the crime has been taken from the kidnappers and is now in safer hands, but the perpetrators got away, so they're back on the bike and the chase is on. Both on the bike and when they're on foot, we get a really good chase. Along with the fights we've seen already, it's clear that Forrest really gets how to write action. The pacing is brilliant and she knows how to keep things high octane. Violet ends up grappling with one member of the group, getting him grounded, but by the time Vigo arrives, the man who was with this grounded one escapes. Vigo is looking at her differently now, commenting on his feeling that she's keeping something from him. This scene is one to sort of stick a pin in for later, as these men will become important later down the line. Lee seems somewhat perturbed by the fact that Violet was so hands-on with assisting Vigo when she's dropped back off with him. I get it though, she's meant to be playing the role of someone learning how to be a Patreon woman, but in her defense, the main goal is to get Vigo a little more pliable so it's easier to stick up on the night of the banquet. And yeah, I think she's going to manage to do that by playing into more of the struggle than trying to actually learn. The next day, she has time to kill until later in the afternoon when she'll be with Vigo. Playing catch with the dog is only getting her so far, and while she can't be out on her own taking him for a walk, there's always her man disguise. It's one of those moments where you just naturally assume something will go wrong, otherwise why would it be here? She has access to what seems like a pretty well-stocked library, which could easily help her pass the time, I'm sure, but while nothing for her goes wrong, walking past a neighbour's house, she hears a woman screaming along with crashing sounds clearly of an attack, followed by a silence that is somehow even more harrowing. While she can't do anything about it now, she hopes that there's a chance Vigo can help. He's a security officer after all. Of course, though, things can't be that simple, and after explaining everything to Vigo upon his arrival, he explains that there's not much he can do right now. Here, Violet is not a viable witness, especially given that she was out on her own, unpermitted, but it's clear that he's not just dismissing what she heard. He believes her, telling her that what it would take is for a man to be witness to it. So, he calls for her to get on the back of his bike. They stop outside on their way to work, but there's nothing to hear this time around. It's a double-edged sword, really. You need him to be able to hear what she did, but that means a woman has to be abused again in order for that to be a viable option. That is left unspoken by the book itself, but with just a little bit of thought, that concept isn't hard to find. As I often say, I'm always banging on about how I love when authors trust their readers to go in a little deeper than the surface and be able to put two and two together. I especially love seeing it with authors writing for non-adult demographics, and I love that Forrest does clearly have some trust in her readers in a lot of areas. The two of them are in his office, clearly getting more comfortable around one another. To an extent, Violet is naturally curious and Vigo is still rather guarded, but not opposed to her being unlike many of the women of his nation. He was, of course, married to a matron woman himself, so we know he likes that kind of vibe. What I do wish Forrest explored a little more is that women in societies like this aren't necessarily super happy with it, but don't have much choice or are indoctrinated and don't really know any difference. Violet is pondering Vigo's preference for matron women and that he likes a woman, quote, whose very nature wasn't to be a doormat. And while I know what she's saying, it isn't their nature. They just don't have any other options. I do wonder if this is looked into later down the line in the series, because I do appreciate that it doesn't really have much time to be pondered on within the space of this narrative, or at least deeply enough to make it worth Forrest's time here, but it's just like women in very strict patriarchal societies. Again, I've spoken about them earlier. You look at, fundamental Christians, especially if you look at... I sort of watch a lot of stuff about fundamental Christians and Mormons and that sort of thing in America, and it's like, yes, on the surface, these women love being the submissive archetype, but they literally don't know the difference. They've been raised that way. And yeah, you also have women like Just Pearly Things who want that, but we also know that a huge part of that is the fact that she has incredibly low self-esteem, her own words, and that's why she's been red-pilled and all that. It's like, there's more to unpack about that, but I understand why this particular book was not the place for her to do so, but then again, don't try and comment that it's like their choice. Vigo's main job this evening is at a big league fighting event, and I don't think I noticed just how much the words big league are used until going back over this, but it didn't annoy me on first read. Maybe if you picked up on it straight away, you might get sick of it, but I wouldn't blame you for it, but it's something and nothing nitpick from me there. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, I didn't realise just how much you say that, but it's like, it's a turn of phrase, it's fine enough. I will say I was happy to see we were getting to another fight and hoped to get another great match breakdown. I cannot stress enough that this is Forrest's forte. It's so good. Though it's a big event, all things considered, this is a pretty standard security job. They're watching out for bad behaviour, he even tackles down a thief. It's what you'd expect for someone stewarding an event like this. it's another opportunity for Violet to really watch him work, and the way she talks about his towering and imposing frame, it seems she's certainly not opposed to this task. She's into the fighting, which I kind of wish we had more detail on, so it takes her a moment to spot something in her company. I became so wrapped in the fight, I only realised Vigo had been closely watching me at the end of the second round. As our eyes met, I felt an odd flurry in my chest. It was the idea of him taking interest in me enough to study me, when, until now, his general instinct had been to look anywhere but at me. His expression was curious, with a hint of amusement, his olive eyes reflecting the bright lights. "You really like all of this, don't you?" I nodded, grinning in spite of myself. I love Vigo's hard shell cracking a little. Seeing her so genuinely happy, it's just like, this is the moment where you can really go, yeah, there's no way she's letting him take the fall later. Or at the very least, this is the moment where it's cemented that she's going to have a big time test of her morality and heart, as if this whole mission isn't hard enough for her in that way. And as an aside, the mention of his eye colour here didn't really bother me. They're sharing a lingering look. You'd notice if that's the sort of thing you focus on. And especially, he has green eyes. That's not the most common, so it is quite striking. As they leave the stadium after the event, there's a group of men with gang tattoos, as we've seen previously, sitting on a bench, staring at Violet. Vigo goes over to see what's going on with them. It's cold and standoffish, but nothing violent. They part ways after some terse words, but it's clear, after her getting one of their men arrested, Violet is on their radar. When he drops her off back home, there's a rather sweet moment between them. They're both trying to start sentences, but stumbling over each other until Violet eventually gets it out that she'd like to accompany him to his fight the following evening, and he agrees. It's lovely, and at this point in my reading, I had my critiques, but generally I was having an alright time with this book. I wasn't hugely enjoying it, but I was somewhat invested in knowing how things would turn out. This is probably the turning point. This chapter is probably the turning point, which is halfway through, basically. There are 39 chapters, this being chapter 20, so it's quite a ways in. And where's my last quote from? That grinning in spite of myself there. That was from page 250 out of just over 400. So we're a little over halfway in terms of page count. It's quite a ways to go to be getting invested. But at the same time, sometimes it is worth sticking with things. And it is a shame that had I not been reading this for review, I might not have done. Chapter 21. When Vigo arrives to her the following evening, she rushes to him, having just heard the screams coming from the neighbour again. They get on the bike to be able to hear what's going on better, and this time Vigo is able to hear what's going on. Unfortunately, the most he can do is put a report in, but it's better than nothing. I don't think this goes much further, but it works as characterization for Vigo. Not only does he take Violet seriously in her claims of what she heard, but is willing to do what he's able to do within the scope his job allows to help this other woman. It's very clear that he is an admirable man within the nation that he is a part of. They get to the arena where Violet previously saw him fight, and they head into a small changing room, though Vigo uses the bathroom in there to do the changing for decency's sake, though decency is not necessarily something that Violet is considering too hard. Vigo spent 20 minutes in the bathroom before emerging. His hair went straight and almost black when it was wet. The darkness of it somehow accentuated the sharpness of his eyes. His standing there damp and bare-chested made him look like some kind of wild, rugged warrior, and more attractive than I'd ever seen him. Girl, if you don't quit barking and get your head in the game, you have a mission to do. Good lord. Absolutely no thoughts in that head of hers at the best of time, and you put this big boy in front of her, and anything that might have been in there has exited right out the door. And I respect that. Good for her. She sees training pads and offers to help, but he turns her down. He refuses to punch a woman, and even if that is just like with the training pads on her hands. And honestly, even if she were a man with the same kind of build she already has, I doubt he would go as hard as he needs. So she offers to reverse the roles, which he's happy to accept. Can't imagine why. Their sparring turns into grappling, which is exactly as flirtatious as you'd expect, resulting in her straddling over the top of him. But before anything else can happen, there's a knock at the door and they, get up and brush themselves off before they can get caught out. Not too many ways to explain their position. I was warming to this book at this point, like I was saying, specifically warming to these two though. And they are the main focus, with what she's going to have to do to the poor bugger looming in the distance. It just becomes less and less likely that she's going to have it in her to set him up. But if she wants to see her brother again... The knock at the door is just someone coming to remind Vigo that the fight is on in 25 minutes. Vigo is very short and responding that he knows this and sends the man back out. It is a complete mystery as to why he's rather tense at that moment and after the man leaves. We'll need Poirot on this case. It's the only way to figure it out. But we very quickly go through those 25 minutes and it is time for the fight. I stood up and followed the man out of the room. Vigo was my guardian, and even though he'd be in the cage, I was supposed to follow him as closely as possible. When we headed down the corridor, however, and reached the wide open door to the arena, I had to hang back with the elderly man while Vigo stepped into the spotlight. The audience exploded. I caught Vigo drawing in a light breath before stalking down the aisle. The spotlight followed him, and I was able to move closer to the darkened doorway without worrying about being spotted. Vigo climbed into the cage opposite his opponent, a guy with ebony skin and cropped black hair. Going by appearance alone, they looked a very even match. Vigo perhaps slightly at a disadvantage. His opponent was a little taller. Really lovely build of anticipation here. Slow pace that matches Vigo's steadiness quite nicely, and knowing how she's written fight scenes before, that anticipation is palpable. While I was overall at a point where I was having a, all right time with this book, I wasn't generally excited by stuff, just interested and invested. But I was actually really looking forward to this, and the entrance here was fun. Sure, there could have been a little more like pomp and ceremony, but that isn't really necessary. It's also worth bearing in mind that we didn't start his entrance from the audience, so we didn't get that announcer getting the crowd G'd up. We're starting this from the back. But Violet gets herself closer to the cage and into his corner, using the fact that her guardian is one of the men in the cage. We get a full and detailed play-by-play of the 2-round fight, with Vigo taking the win via a tap-out. It's so clear that if MMA isn't an interest of Forrest's, she knows damn well how to do her research. While I haven't watched in a good few years, I do still watch a normal amount of pro wrestling, and I love the good graps. ZSJ my beloved, and no, I definitely didn't cry when Danielson retired. I don't know what you're talking about. I got away from myself. Where were we? Oh yes, graps. Yes, Forrest is so good at getting the detail of grappling and getting someone into a good position, either on the floor or getting them down to the mat. There's clear game plans from both opponents, with Vigo wanting to get grappling and his opponent clearly trying to avoid that as much as he can. It isn't just a one-sided thing. She really gets how the two work as one machine in this, even if the focus remains primarily on Vigo. It's fantastic. The booming voice announced Vigo to be the undisputed winner. The referee held Vigo's arm aloft. The second he let go, Vigo was heading back to his cage exit. He climbed out, his feet hitting the floor in front of me, his skin shining with sweat. He swept past me, catching my hand at the last moment and pulling me down the aisle alongside him toward the exit. It's rare in like Bad Red Book Club stuff that I actually have a little ooh moment while reading a romantic pairing, but this little moment, yeah, I had a little ooh. That's probably a little bit That's probably a little bit related to the before and frequently mentioned love of pro wrestling for all the normal reasons. I should move on. When they're back in his changing room, Vigo is off in the bathroom, showering, and there's a knock at the door from someone with the PFL. He waits inside with Violet until Vigo comes back in, when we find out that this is someone Vigo is familiar with. The PFL is the Power Fight League. This is the big leagues we've heard so much about that Vigo has turned down being a part of more than once, and tells this man that he doesn't plan on changing his mind anytime soon. This man is intent on getting Vigo a contract though, and makes good points. The money increase is a good sweetener, but makes a point. The money increase is a good sweetener, but the best point he makes gets right at Vigo's main rebuttal. We've seen ourselves that despite Vigo saying he doesn't go to this league because he likes his sense of privacy, he already has a big following. People are clamouring to see him, and frankly, it would not be too much of a change were he to move up. Violet even points out that they've said the fight won't be broadcast, it'll be dark, so while there will be more people in the venue than he's used to, it won't go national, and besides, the contract is only for a single fight, likely a taste of him to, sign with them, basically. The man says he'll be in contact again in the morning. Basically, that seems to be confirmation of Vigo taking up his offer, but it is pretty clear that this is going to happen. We round out the chapter with Violet suggesting that Vigo could have a new fighting moniker, thanks to his undefeated status. Vigo the Victor Croft. Which was such a silly way to end the chapter. I can't help but feel this should have ended with the PFL guy leaving, because, oh my god, Vigo, I win matches Croft. And what if he does lose a match? Vigo the Victor except for that one time Croft? Behave. Chapter 22. They have to take the long way back to Lee's because of a road accident, and at some point on the journey, she helps Vigo get his jacket off, meaning they don't have to stop. That sounds like a dangerous nightmare on a bike, but he does strike me as a Harley guy, so it's probably a lot easier than on a sports style bike, and besides, that act is only there so she can feel up on his muscles and then cozy up all sleepy behind him. While this isn't my favourite romance in the world, it's well done and clearly set up for the growing struggle with her being able to set him up at the end. I certainly can't be mad at it, and I can imagine someone really vibing with this. In terms of romantic pairings in general, this is actually pretty refreshing, especially given this is a teen/YA book from basically a decade ago at this point. Oh boy, the toxicity in the in that time. Whew! When she gets home, Violet gives Lee a rundown of the night, including accepting the offer for the PFL fight. I don't think I caught him accepting, going back over this, but yeah, he did accept. I thought the conversation they're having now happened the next day, but yeah, anyway, look, that's not the most important thing, because what is the most important thing is that Lee is not best pleased, especially given that Violet was actively encouraging him to take the offer. Why would you encourage him to move up to the PFL? It didn't occur to you that this could mess up his entire schedule, his training, his fights? For heaven's sake, Violet, I warned you not to lose focus. I found myself stumbling for words, unsure of what to say. Lee was right. I hadn't given the slightest thought of what consequences might ensue if he enjoyed the PFL. His entire schedule that I'd gone to the trouble of noting down could be turned on its head. For all we knew, Vigo might be offered a PFL fight on the night of the banquet. Have someone's feelings got the better of her? I'm sorry, I said. I've been trying to make friends with him and I slipped up. We can't afford slip-ups. And do I need to remind you that my life is on the line just as much as yours in this? I know, I said through clenched teeth. Even though I seem to be the one taking on the major risks all the time, I felt like snapping something back at him, but I held my tongue. I knew I had messed up. And honestly, I've ragged on Violet through this, but I am kind of with her here. Yes, it's risky for both of them on the whole, but so far, Violet has been far more in the direct line of fire and put in delicate situations that would be so easy to get wrong, especially for a newbie. I went from no real strong feelings towards Lee overall to getting the ick at this point, only confounded by... He began moving toward the door, but as he passed my seat, he stopped. He glanced down at me, still in my chair, a furtive look in his eyes. Unexpectedly, he stooped. A second later, his moist lips were pressing against the side of my neck beneath my right ear in a firm, chaste kiss. And then just as suddenly, he drew away. Good night, he managed before sweeping out of the kitchen. Ew! Ugh! My brother in Christ, where the hell did that come from? I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but the most we've had from him in this kind of area is him making a pointed comment to her, making sure she stays focused with Vigo, which seemed like he was being low-key possessive. But it was something that, like, easily could have been written off. It was just a weird act from him. And I know what he's doing. He's trying to keep her on his side to make it easier to get rid of Vigo later, but, like, ugh! It could have been a forehead kiss. And with that, I probably wouldn't have felt the need to comment. Not at least not this much. Not even the cheek? Or the lips? Man went for neck first, nasty ass. At least Forrest doesn't guide us to a love triangle act with this. But a love triangle with this act. Sorry, but just like, at least, you know, Violet thinks he's weird as well, but he's just like, ugh, ew. I mean, yes, this whole scene does become really important later on, but bleh, bleh. And while I believe, with the helpful context of knowing how everything turns out, that this was purely a manipulative act, at the time, I was in the same, I came to the same conclusion of Violet, which is, maybe I'm not the only one losing focus. Chapter 23. Things are awkward when they see each other in the morning, as you might expect, and the two of them are making the choice to act like Lee didn't act like a weirdo last night. Fair enough, really. I'd want to say something, but sometimes making things more awkward isn't the choice. They have a job to do. Violet won't be with Vigo. Violet won't... Hang on, give me a second. Violet won't be with Vigo today, as Lee has cancelled that arrangement for the day, saying that she's needed at the lab. I said today like 4 times in that sentence while I was scripting. Good lord, let me try again. Nah, fuck it. While that is true, it does feel like it's remarkably convenient that he's getting her away from Vigo right after the previous night's events, but... When they're on the journey to the lab, Lee tells Violet that she's needed today because she's going to be installing the explosives. She's in disguise, of course, but is still racked with nerves for a bunch of reasons, all pretty fair, really. Despite the disguise, there's still the fear that someone will see through it. Lee's co-workers have seen her without the disguise, so it's not bulletproof as it would be elsewhere. Well, more bulletproof elsewhere, I guess. But I think more importantly, she does not know jack shit about explosives, which frankly feels like the most important thing here. Sure, she's going to be given clear instructions on what to do when she's in there, but it's actually kind of annoying to see the expectations placed on her. It doesn't feel like he has confidence in her, but instead he expects she can just do stuff despite her complete lack of experience in pretty much everything she's been asked to do so far. This isn't like an IKEA flat pack. She's handling explosives, having never dealt with them before. And if the slightest thing goes wrong, I'm sure she'd be berated because God forbid a girl have no experience in something insane. Now all that remained was action. He gave me a firm nod before stepping out of the car. I watched Lee hurry to the building through the rain. He let himself inside and his shadow disappeared behind the glass. I stared down at the pager. In about 15 minutes he should be buzzing me. I kept watch of the digital clock above the dashboard, my fingers clenching around the handle of the bag. Soon only 1 minute was left. 30 seconds. 10 seconds. The pager buzzed 5 seconds too late. I took my cue to leave. This goes back to what I was just saying. If this were the other way around and Violet had been more than, like, a few seconds late, you know Lee would be a right bellend about it. But I also really like how this speaks to what's to come on the big day, in the sense that every single second counts. For the most part, Violet has done well as she can in the position she's in, but Lee, he's been doing this for years, and his tardiness is a real problem. When she gets into the egg room, it did hit me that there are only really 3 possibilities for how this whole thing turns out when the contents are revealed. Or if, I guess. Well, I know that it's a when, but at this point it was an if. 1. It's all worth it. The contents are cool, striking, weird, whatever. Like, important enough to have waited for so long for a reveal and for them to go to all this trouble for it. 2. It's deeply disappointing. The sort of reveal where you just sit there and go, what? Oh. Right. 3, it's very funny. This is still a disappointment, but at least you can laugh at it. And honestly, I had no inkling of which one it was going to be. But I was along for the ride, and I will say, it seems like she's just hiding the explosives here more than actually doing any kind of deeply complex work. But it's still not really a light matter for someone with no experience. I stand by what I said. Once she's got things in place, there's a moment where things seem like she might be being caught, but that gets sorted out pretty quickly. It works well in the book, but isn't something I'm too bothered about focusing on here. What I will focus on, however, is what happens at the end of this chapter when she reunites with Lee. He looked at me sideways. Did you pull it off? Yes, I huffed. It's done. Lee nodded, relief washing over his face. Good girl. No! Do not call her that. I know you two are meant to be like this good Patreon couple, but that's only when other people are around. Treat her with a little respect and dignity. Good girl. She's not a dog. And before I get comments about this being like a mainstay comment in a lot of romance, one, it's almost always patronising there too. Two, it's often in relationships where the two of them are at least hooking up. That's not the case here. And three, this is a young adult book. That kind of talk is generally reserved for more erotic content. I don't want to hear it. Chapter 24. The next day, Violet is back with Vigo and is relieved to learn that his fight is scheduled for the weekend before the banquet, so there's no clash there, and any changes to his training schedule obviously won't affect their plans. Well, I imagine the relief comes from not having to deal with Lee and how he would react if there was a schedule clash. She's very clearly getting more and more reluctant to set him up, and that will only keep on growing. While out with Vigo doing his duties, Violet overhears him talking about the man who escaped when she took the gang member down. This man is said to have fully escaped with no sign of him. It's pretty clear that he's going to come back up again, but my theory as to how that was happened didn't end up being right. I thought he might end up being used as the scapegoat instead of Vigo, as there would be no hard feelings there, and it wouldn't be too hard to believe, but we'll get to the way we bring him back a little later. As he's only in work for half a day, Vigo takes this opportunity to get some training in before his big fight and does so at his cabin in the mountains with Violet still in tow. He's got a bunch of gym equipment set up in the back garden where he works out while Violet checks out the view. The place is set up in the mountains, so it is bloody gorgeous out there, and she's never had the chance to see anything like this. And Vigo wants to move somewhat further into the mountains when he's able to. Not too far though. He says he doesn't want to go past Thicket's Bridge, but we don't get to find anything more about that. And I put in my script in, not quite yet, thinking that Thicket's Bridge is the term that's used in a scene later on, but it's not. And I still don't recall the word that's used there later on. But we'll hear the word porticue, basically. I don't know if that's how it's meant to be said, but that's how I'm going to say it, and I will put the word on screen later. But I thought Thicket's Bridge might be the word, but I assume Thicket's Bridge is, like, between where they are now and Porticue, but I don't recall that being explained quite well enough, but anyway. She tests some of his equipment while he's taking a break, and I slipped my hands into my pockets, kicking at the ground casually as I asked, "Would you teach me a thing or two about what you know?" Teach you what, exactly? I don't know, some punching and blocking tips, some grappling techniques. You're like a snake when you get hold of someone. Girl, I know your game. Grappling techniques, my backside. And yes, there probably is truth in it, but like, come on. Last time you tried this, it ended up with you straddling him. And I'm sure you'd be so upset about that happening again, huh? Actually, this is Violet we're dealing with. She probably is actually just dead eager to get scrappy, and the straddling is just a bonus. So, grapple they do, with Vigo putting her in a series of holds, asking her how she would attempt to get out of them. And now, he said, sitting and twisting me around so that my back was against his chest, "If I held you in this choke?" He locked one arm around my neck, the other fastening my arms behind my back. "How would you get out?" He's just out here like, now what? And she's so oblivious. It's fun, mostly because it actually feels playful. He doesn't feel threatening here, nor is he being so overt that you get the ick. And yes, that's exactly what you hope for reading a romance plot, but like, just because something gets published doesn't mean it's good. And there's a whole rancid bunch of ideas about what romance is out there, but thankfully that doesn't fall into that category. We have someone here who is like I guess, typically rugged and masculine, he's not nasty with it. It feels like a fucking miracle in this genre. And we know that this is headed for a particular kind of moment. They're grappling and they topple in the grass, and I froze, realising just how close we'd come to each other. Closer than I think we'd ever been. I paused for a few seconds to take in the details of his eyes, his dark lashes, every hue of green in his irises, and the way they seemed to gleam as he looked back at me. Then, experiencing a flush of bashfulness, I switched back into fighting mode. Of course, if he was actually fighting with me, he would have made things a lot more difficult. But as I released him and we both sat up, there was still a shine to his eyes. He seemed pleased. I bet he bloody did. You'll have been right up in each other's business. Also, definitely an appropriate time to be bringing up Piccolo. Like, they're so up close to each other. And, you know, she's checking him out while being like a deer in a headlight. It works perfectly well. They sit up on his roof watching the sunset. It's gentle, if a little awkward. The two of them not quite able to break through the other's barrier. We end with Violet asking what would happen if someone was to feel like they don't belong on either side of the river, with Vigo unable to respond. Chapter 25. The next few days are about getting down to business, tying things up for the big day on Wednesday, but before that, we have a fight to attend. When they arrive, they're led by one of the co-founders of the PFL to Vigo's changing room, one far flashier than the one they had when they were fighting last time. She asks him what the plan is when he wins, and his response is basically, depends on the buzz. If he can deal with it, the increased recognition, then he'll continue with them. If not, then that's that. Vigo is led out of the room for some final discussion with the ref and his opponent, with a guy that's just like dressed in a sort of assistant uniform. It's clearly that he's like, it's in a PFL type uniform, but Violet is asked to remain where she is. After finishing my water, I needed the bathroom. I locked myself inside and realised I'd been sweating in spite of the air conditioning. It was the buzzing stadium, being surrounded by crowds of people, the atmosphere wrought with tension and excitement. But the second I stepped out of the bathroom, a heavy fist flew at me from out of nowhere, caught me straight in the face. As I tried to yell, a hand clamped around my mouth, and then a second hand, lined with some kind of pungent-smelling tissue, folded around my nose. My brain became foggy. I could no longer struggle, and then all went black. This was a really well-placed surprise. That step out the bathroom to a punch in the face works so well. And it really serves Violet's characterization. She has to be completely taken off guard to be taken down, because she's well capable of defending herself. It's played very nicely. Chapter 26. I woke up to a splitting headache and a coppery taste in my mouth. Blood. My own blood. I was lying flat on my back, the floor hard and rough beneath me, and cold, terribly cold. Prying my eyes open, I sat upright. Metal clanked, and I realised that my wrists and ankles were fastened with chains. Chains that were fixed to the wall behind me, immovable, no matter how hard I strained against them, and my clothes were ripped, my hair a matted mess. Listen. Repetition as emphasis, it's fine generally, but this is too much in one go here. For me, I just get this, yes, I know, you just told me this feeling, and I find it dull when overused like this. Where am I? My heart pounding, I fixed my eyes on the opposite wall, where jagged words had been scrawled in red paint. Welcome to Porticu. I stopped breathing. And I feel like I was supposed to go, oh my god, when I saw it, but I fully had no idea what that meant. And I still don't know if it's something that I should have spotted earlier. This book is not one that I have in an ebook. I only have a physical copy, so I can't fucking search it up and find out if I missed it earlier. But in going back over it for scripting, it is almost like a secondary, like, full read-through, and I spotted nothing either time, so you get to find out what that means as I did when I was actually reading it. There are many photographs on the wall of women in the fetal position, unaware that the picture is being taken with the legs of a man visible next to them, though no more of him can be seen, though it seems like it is a different man in each picture, including on the picture at the bottom of the wall, a picture, of course, of Violet. So, you know, it is rather harrowing, and this had me very wary about how things were going to go here, given just how reminiscent this is of how, at the very least, trafficking is displayed in media. I'm not saying this is how it functions in reality, of course. I have no idea about how that works, but it does feel very much like the Hollywood version of it, and that made me very nervous. We haven't really gone too far into the nefarious nature of the gang mentioned throughout, and I just hoped Forrest would handle whatever this is with a little decorum. When I was talking earlier about the fear that we would have an sexual assault scene, and I said I went over my notes for a scene later on to check, oh my god, is this going to happen? This was the scene I was checking later on, and thankfully, no, that does not happen. Two men enter the room she's imprisoned in. The first is the PFL attendant. I mean, who knows how true that role is, but the one that told Violet to stay in the changing room as he took Vigo away, and the other is the gang member that had escaped when she helped take down his accomplice on his first outing with Vigo. His first outing? Her first outing with Vigo. And that second man grabs her throat, making sure she's aware this is all being watched on a camera in the corner of the room. She's in perfect view, though these two are tactically keeping their backs to that camera. They quickly make it clear that the goal here, at least at first, is to teach her to know her place. A frail-looking woman, Ada, is summoned into the room. She's sporting the same face tattoo as the man who grabbed Violet, and this woman immediately goes for her, dragging her to her feet, screaming at Violet because the man that she took down was this woman's husband. And frankly, boo-hoo, bitch. Like, have you considered that your husband is a piece of shit who tried kidnapping someone? Aw, did he get taken down by a 19-year-old girl? Skill issue. This woman begins to beat Violet into a rage until she pulls out a knife ready to cut Violet up, but she's stopped by one of the men in there, not wanting to escalate things too quickly, because this isn't just about making sure Violet knows her place, but other women like her. More people come in, and everyone there except Violet are now donning masks so they can more easily do what they feel they need to without being seen on the camera. One of these men hands Ada a hot iron rod, which is brandished near but not yet touching Violet. Ada gathered a strand of my hair and trailed it over the hot iron, singeing it and producing a sickening burning smell. She waved the frayed ends of my hair before my face, pressing them to my nostrils. Imagine what your skin will smell like. She grabbed my arm and extended it before glancing at the camera. An oily smile glided across her face as she addressed the lens. This is for every woman out there who thinks it's okay to shout back at her man. She lowered the hot iron bar against my sensitive inner wrist. My skin exploded in agony. A screech erupted from my throat. I was sure that I would pass out. Honestly, I'm glad this is the direction Forrest decided to go in. This is still uncomfortable, but not in a way that makes me want to stop reading. The violence is well written, but doesn't feel overindulgent, and yeah, the dialogue is a little bit iffy, but it is hard to make someone sound actually tough, and this all do sound a bit try-hard, but, you know, sometimes that is like the point, I guess. And yeah, I know these guys have managed to kidnap someone and they are literally being violent, but the way they speak doesn't quite fit. But frankly, I was just nervous that this scene would go in a sexually violent direction. While Forrest doesn't seem like that kind of author, that kind of thing can sometimes come out of nowhere. And let's be real, if we think about male violence directed towards women, this is going to be what we're thinking about, especially if Violet is going to live to tell the tale, and given this isn't the end of the novel, and I know that this is a series, I felt I could safely assume that she was going to live, but thankfully, like I said, we don't go there. Ada continues, burning Violet up the inside of her arm until suddenly she stops, seemingly a tactic to keep Violet on her toes and keep the fear going. More people enter, bringing with them a table that would be well at home in an old school psychiatric facility. It's adorned with straps to keep anyone on it tied down, in this case Violet, and when she is tied down, those around her remove knives from their belts and are just about to cut her before, as the blades began to press into me, piercing skin, a man yelled outside, "Evacuate!" The door burst open and in stepped another man, face shining with sweat, eyes alight with alarm. "Wardens!" he panted. The word sent relief rolling through my body. "What?" the runaway man yelled back. "Impossible, they can't have reached us so quickly." Now, my assumption was that they also did something with Vigo, who we know has a tracker on him, even if they wouldn't have any reason to know that. But also, she's the wife of a pretty high-standing member of society and has been under the guardianship of a warden. Surely there's a brain cell rattling somewhere around the lot of them. But Violet gets taken off the table and she gets kneed in the head. I can only assume that so they can, quick time keep her a bit delirious while they drag her away, and they soon end up outside where she's bundled into a car. There's gunshots and sirens all around and she cannot keep up with what's going on around her. Forrest does a fantastic job in creating the atmosphere here. It's all incredibly overwhelming and it's really easy to start to feel as lost and confused as Violet is. That's a compliment, to be clear. Forrest really gets you in the moment. Without warning, the car stops and she's being dragged outside again. Despite everything, she manages to put up a fight, and this is happening by a small stream. My wrist slipped from the man's grasp and I lurched for his knees, toppling him backward into the water. As he landed, his right hand instantly moved to his knife, but I had already predicted that. I slid the blade out of its sheath and without a second's hesitation, slashed his throat in a fit of fury. That's kill 3, baby, and probably 4. Given the way Patris handles criminals, she helped that attempted kidnapper get arrested, so that's likely him done for as well. But it's 3 confirmed kills and 3 kills at her hand, this from a 19-year-old girl, but conveniently all in self-defense, so morally she's easier to clear. But soon more men are on her, making it impossible to fight them all, but by God she tries. All of a sudden, one of the men collapses on her, and when she's able to get up, the rest of them are scattering away, and the collapsed one has a bullet hole in him. Vigo rushes to her, checking she's alright and that the blood on her isn't her own. She's clearly rattled, fair enough, but they need to get out sooner rather than later, so he lifts her over his shoulder in order to get to safety. He gets them to a waterside bank so they can get themselves clean and free of the blood of the man back at the stream. It may be self-defense, but the same could have been said of his late wife, and he says as much to Violet. While it would matter to those in power less in this case because of who the man is, it's not worth the risk. When they're out, he scoops her up once more and it all catches up to her and she passes out in his arms. It's a really powerful chapter, bringing back a lot of what's been hinted at through the book so far and wrapping up certain parts of that quite nicely. We can now focus pretty firmly on the banquet and whether or not Violet can let herself use Vigo as a scapegoat, especially given how he put himself at real risk for her here. Chapter 27. It turns out Vigo was able to track Violet down thanks to Lee. I think I keep calling her Violent. I think you'll know what I mean if I have done that before. He might not know he's got a tracker in him himself, but Lee is now the one to break it to Violet that she's also got one. She has to think back now between, her current moment and the last time she checked the trackers, and it matters that, nope. And she comes to the conclusion that he must have done it the night she joined Vigo for his fight, when she helped convince him to work for the PFL. And honestly, I wasn't surprised. It was that night where Lee started to become weird, though not necessarily suspicious, but from here, that's certainly the word I'd use for him. Though suspicious behaviour or not, it at least ended up being for some good. That's often shaky grounds for justification, and I am certainly not doing so, but you have to find a little light where you can. And I will also say there is a scene between the weird neck kiss and the fight that was supposed to happen at the PFL, where Lee and Violet are talking with Vigo, and Lee's being like weirdly over like protective of her. It's not, but that's what it looks like. He's got his arm around her. He's being very possessive. That's the word I was trying to think of, not protective. He's being kind of possessive of her. So it's not the only occasion. I didn't put it in my script because it was like the scene itself is not super like integral, but his behaviour there is weird. Chapter 28. This is a very short chapter. She's seen by a doctor, she's stitched up and given a wheelchair for the next few days, as she is still dealing with a good amount of dizziness. I'm honestly surprised she's not more badly concussed, but from a writing perspective, I get that. That would cause such a pointless problem. There are only 4 days from the banquet. From the banquet to the banquet. Like, as a writer, don't make things harder for yourself than they have to be. Do you know what I mean? My eyelids felt heavy as lead. I needed to sleep. Lee took the hint. I'll leave you alone, he said. You have to recover as quickly as possible. We only have 4 days left. Whatever happens, we can't let this interfere with the banquet. My brother in Christ, she nearly fucking died. Give her a damn minute. Let the girl be traumatized for like a second. You know? Chapter 29. The banquet. As much as I tried to put off thinking about it, the time was drawing too close now. As much as I struggled to continue brushing it aside, I couldn't. I could no longer keep it thrust down to the depths of my subconscious. Only 4 days left. 4 days and I will be calling Vigo to the scene of the crime. 4 days and I will be framing him for an atrocity he didn't commit. 4 days and I will have ruined his life. Maybe given the court some reason to take it from him. First of all, I like the repetition there. There have been many moments where I don't like the way she uses it, and I can take this as a separate thing from the fact that she's overused this technique so much. Here I really like that because it feels like the spiraling thoughts in her mind. And frankly, it's also about bloody time for this girl's consciousness to fully catch up with her. All it took was a little bit of trauma and you realising what's actually going to happen when this is over. When it's over. And I get it. Like, to be clear, she has had to focus in the hope to, like, see her brother again. But even without getting to know Vigo, as she has been doing, he's still very much an innocent man. She had a sliver of hesitation, but, you know, we've all got morals, but let's, like, you know what? Let's not rag on the girl too much. She's turning her thoughts around now, so let's see how she handles it. She's sort of left to stew in her room for a bit, mulling over the racing thoughts. She does not want to do this anymore, but knows it's too late for any of that. She has to tell Alistair on a call that she and Lee will both be ready in time for the I keep saying blanket, and I kept typing blanket when I was writing my bloody script as well. Banquet. She does try to tell Lee that she isn't sure if she's ready, and that she's reluctant to let Vigo take the fall, given he saved her life. Lee's not having it though. She has to think of the bigger picture, and to be fair, it is pretty late to be doing something like this. I was having weird feelings about Lee by this point, but he has to have his own reasons for doing this too, I guess. We were on a freight train with broken brakes. We had to execute or die trying. But as Lee left me to rest again and get an early night, I knew that I had to become a different kind of passenger. The kind of passenger to leap from a runaway train, the kind who would not wait until the end. Now, this fully had me convinced that she was going to rat to Rigo and tell him everything. She'd have to know that this was a bad idea, but at the same time, I'd understand whichever way she'd go. I'd not be happy if she didn't at least try to help him get out of this, but we haven't got to that point yet. She's not made any decisions. Chapter 30. Midnight rings through and she has now made her decision. While she has no idea what she's doing, she's only really got one option of how she's going to get to Vigo. Does she know how to ride a bike? No. Is that going to stop her trying? Absolutely not. I did wonder if she was going to fall off the bike on the way, or at the very least, like, the bike was going to hamper her getting there in some way. And yet she does have a little fall before she's even got started, but that doesn't stop her. And in her defence, she is concussed, she is not the brightest, and she has never ridden a bike before. Well, not as a driver anyway. And I feel like under pressure, it is much easier to figure out like a car than a bike. I feel like I could definitely figure out a car under pressure. And you also then don't have the balance issues to worry about there. So, all power to her. Though she is on her way to Vigo's, I wasn't sure if she was going to fully spill or if she was just going to try and keep him away from the banquet somehow. Framing Vigo wasn't the only way. I knew it wasn't. There had to be other scapegoats we could use. We could pin the whole operation on the men of Porticu, leave a message behind on the building in big red letters or something declaring it an act of rebellion. They were already anarchists, so this could follow on naturally from their recent kidnapping of me. And frankly, this is the most she's used her brain in the entire book, I think. Sure, she's being impulsive and very last minute here, but this has been brewing steadily basically since she knew that they'd be framing an innocent man. And using these people instead is something that's made sense for some time, but now it would be easier than ever to make them take the fall. She doesn't so much bring the bike to a stop as she does sort of fall off in a ditch and stumbles to Vigo's front porch. He doesn't answer her knocking for a while, so she actually turns to leave, thinking maybe he's not even in, but he is, and safe to say he's rather surprised to see her, and more surprised to see that she's managed to get to him on a bike without any help or serious injury. While in the narration, she is clear that she isn't going to spill everything. She does want to get enough info to him that she can then use that to keep him safe, and I was a little surprised by this. I get it, spilling that her and Liam Matron spies isn't the smartest move in the world, but yeah, I mean, she's interrupted before she can say anything though, and she's got a pager in her pocket, and buzz from Mr. Lee Bertrand, say anything and he will be assassinated. So needless to say, he knows exactly where she is, who she's with, and what she's planning on doing. She does question why offing him would be necessary, but like, my sister in Christ, use your brain. He'd know too much in regards to national secrets. No, he would not be able to live after knowing that. When they finally get inside, Vigo is trying to get info out of Violet as to what the hell she's doing there at this hour, fearing that maybe Lee has done something untoward towards her, or even if they've just had a serious argument, but she struggles to get any words out. She's just frozen after that message from Lee. But eventually, when I gazed at his face, adrenaline surged in me. My pulse raced. For the first time, I knew exactly what to do. It didn't require any thinking, any weighing of the pros and cons, just instinct. Pure, inescapable instinct. If you're not going to talk, then I need to take you. Vigo's voice trailed off as I closed the small distance between us. My arms acted of their own accord as they wound around his neck and shoulders. Then they were pulling me upward, closer, until I was standing on my tiptoes. My brows furrowed, my eyelids shut, and then my lips were on his. Heat rolled through my body. It goes so far as a make-out session, nothing more, perfectly age-appropriate, and well-written enough that I never got the ick, and it was about time something happened between these two, but before it has a chance to escalate into anything more, there's a knock at the door, and I am so relieved that Forrest went this route for the scene. I know it sounds like a given that this scene would be age-appropriate, but there are far too many teen books with explicit content, which is fucking rancid. I've spoken before about how, with the rise of more explicit books being mainstream, I do think age ratings on books are becoming necessary. There is no visual difference between the cover of a safe teen romance and smutty adult erotica, and while we can't judge a book by its cover, a little more warning should be expected, especially given the writing style of so many of these published fanfic type books. They're written so much like teen and young adult books. I just think that something more needs to be done for the sake of clarity. You look at something like Icebreaker, the cover of that looks so teenaged. And I remember when I was doing my review for it, that is a point I kept making. It's written like a young adult book. It's written like a teen book, but it is chock full of sex. That's not appropriate for kids. And people in I was in a charity shop recently, and it was either It was either one of Hannah Grace's books or it was an Ali Hazelwood book. And it was in the kids section. Like, they had a kids section with some books on the shelf, and I went to them and I had to make sure they knew, don't put that there, that's not for kids, it's got adult content in it. I don't know if all of Ali Hazelwood's does, but I know right at the beginning of my channel I read The Love Hypothesis. It was fine. I was only listening to it on audiobook, and quite frankly it was probably not as good as I thought it was, because I was just listening on audio and not really paying attention enough. But you know, I was only just starting this thing out. Well, I know I'd been doing reviews written beforehand, but my point is, even if all the rest of her books don't have the amount of explicit content that that one did, I wouldn't want them taking the chance, and there isn't enough clarity on what that is inside. Like, look, to get back to the point, I'm really glad that Forrest remained tasteful in all this. It's good to see an author who actually knows and cares about the audience that they're writing for. Chapter 31. Vigo remains stoic as he opens the door to Lee, who spins a yarn like, Violet has been having such funny turns since everything in Porticue. You'll have to forgive her. He's a terrifyingly good liar and doesn't sound like that. He has been for a while, but it really starts to feel sinister here. I don't know why it feels so different this time, but it does. I guess we have just heard him be like, I will have him killed if you say anything, so we know more about what he's willing to do in a more direct way. Lee tells him that he'll be back in the morning to collect the bike, and any money that he owes him for being Violet's guardian will be deposited ASAP. It all feels like it's being said with a kind of flashy salesman smile that's a little bit too sort of polished clean. He just becomes more and more false as we reach the end, and it is played fantastically. Lee doesn't actually change, it just becomes more clear, if that makes sense. On the journey home, Violet is trying to push for a way to blame anyone else, but Lee tells her it is too late for that now. Not only that, but Vigo was the intended target well before she joined the mission, and when they're home, the conversation turns to what actually happened when she was there. Lee seeming to sense that it was something romantic, and it looks like there's a pang of jealousy in him. Avoiding his gaze, I moved to push past him, but he gripped my arm and pulled me back, forcing me to face him. Did he touch you? Lee's expression was serious, his blue eyes glimmering in the soft hallway light. No, I replied through gritted teeth, but Lee wasn't buying it. Are you sure? I kissed him, I exploded. What does it matter to you? His lips parted in admission. It matters more to me than you think. Lee? You are aware this marriage is just for the sake of the mission, right? Also, this woman has shown him zero signs of interest the whole time we've known them, and frankly, they haven't spent that much time together. Get a grip, fam. At least Violet and Vigo were hanging out on the daily, getting to know each other. This is a complaint about Lee the character, not Forrest's writing, to be clear. Her characterization all works very well and is very consistent, even if some of them aren't my cup of tea. She storms past him into her room to have a little cry into her pillow. I mean, fam, mood. But it's too late now. And she knows it. But the worst kind of confirmation comes in the form of Lee giving her a pill to take in preparation for the following day's activities. Benoxapan. While it's a diluted dose, it is nonetheless still the emotional inhibitor that the King's Labs have been working on. Suppressing her is the only tactic Lee has left, and unfortunately, Violet feels like she's out of options. On my first read, I was less charitable to Violet here, feeling as though she was being dense again, and not seeing what he was doing to her, but on a second read, that isn't quite right. I think she is well aware of what he's doing, but she hasn't got a way to change things. The only way that she could make things go the way they need to is to take the pill. Maybe then she'll be able to see her brother. I've, quite rightly, ragged on her for being a bit thick at times, but my judgment was clouded here on my first read, and I can admit that. I also had the idea that maybe it was something more than just the emotional inhibitor, but it isn't. We end the chapter with her taking those meds, marking the end of any hope that things can change. Chapter 32. The drugs also made her drowsy, meaning she doesn't wake up till midday. Tied with my wrong theory that was more than just the Binuxpan in her system, I believe Lee was basically keeping her knocked out to keep her out of the way. It is quite funny seeing my later notes as I'd become more properly invested at some point reading it. I feel like she just like go, wake up, stick to your guns, save Vigo. I never expected to get as bought in as I did towards the end. It took a while, and had I not been reading for a review, I may never have got to the point, but I did. So, they go over the plans, making sure she knows where to be and when to get Vigo to the place they need him to be in order to set him up. She is so numb at this point to everything, so she's just nodding along to it all. She's almost becoming the ideal matriarch woman with one simple drug. I would imagine that is some foreshadowing for its use later on in the book series. She calls Vigo, telling him she needs to talk to him and it needs to be in person. She lets him know that she will be at the banquet that evening and there's a really good time and place that they can meet. In this, she seals his fate. Chapter 33. Lee was pleased with my performance. Now you can relax for the next few hours, he said. We will be leaving here at 5:30 to allow us some leeway with traffic, but I suggest you get ready in good time. And wear something nice. I wished that we didn't have hours to wait. I wish that we could leave now and get it all over with. The closer we get to the end, the more smarmy Lee gets. Well, honestly, he gets worse than smarmy later, but we're not there yet. Wear something nice. You patronising git. Oh no, mate, it's a banquet with the king in attendance. I thought I'd wear me joggers. I'll make it right nice. Tuck him into me socks and that. Fucking piss taker. Though, it is interesting that despite the Binuxapan, there is a level of underlying nerves. The sooner this gets done, the better. Her emotions are numbed, but there's still a presence of them. Though I imagine she wants to be sure the drugs are still functioning in her system as they go through this final part of the mission. After I finished dressing and trying to make my hair look presentable, I left my room and found Lee sitting at his computer again. He was already dressed in a black tuxedo. His hair was gelled back, his face clean shaven. He looked bland, nondescript, the polar opposite of Vigo's rugged style. Also, the further we've gone in, the more we can see Violet going off Lee as well. She could see that someone could find him attractive, even if not her at first, but the more his personality has shone through, the less she's been able to see anything in him. Plus, she has had that alternative that she can find actually attractive and find comfort with in Vigo. They leave for the banquet, Violet feeling a little odd, realising that this is the last time she'll see the house. They leave the dog behind, by the way. I hope something was arranged for him, otherwise I'm throwing hands, but I swear to God. Justice for Samuel. When they arrive, Violet is with Lee as he does some, mingling. She's obviously not really meant to be speaking with the men unless spoken to first, so she's just, by his side. There's a little worry that the king is going to be late, making it more difficult to make a subtle escape when the bombs go off, as the guests wouldn't be in the desired location yet. But there's nothing to worry about, as he isn't too late, and his arrival marks time to head into the hall itself. At some point, Lee gets a very totally definitely real call on his phone, supposedly from the hospital. Violet's very real, totally definitely real aunt has been taken ill, and she keeps up this phone call for about 5 minutes until the first bomb goes off. Aren't these two meant to be being fucking conspicuous? Inconspicuous rather? Right after they leave, there is a huge explosion. I wonder who will become a suspect if that, what? I swear the blast was meant to go off and that was their cue to get out and get the egg, but apparently not. This just makes no sense. And where I often complain about the way characters act as a compliment to Forrest's writing, this is not one of those times. Usually it's you're acting a bit silly, but it makes sense for the world you've built, for the characterization you have, but this makes no sense whatsoever if you want the two of them to go unnoticed. But at least they're still in a position to get the egg, I guess. Violet fucking legs it up to the lab and has to now set up the second load of explosives around the casing, keeping the egg safe. Now, I was sure that Lee had said that someone else was getting this part done and Violet's only task was retrieval here, but here we go. I'm surprised she managed to do this under so much pressure. This is hardly like a thoughtless task, and her brains aren't her strong suit, but good on her, I guess. Though when she presses the activator, it does look like there's a problem at first. Whether the cylinders were faulty to begin with, or the fault had something to do with the 2 cylinders that I dropped, I didn't know. I hurried back to the explosive and examined the wires, thinking that perhaps I hadn't inserted them properly. Do they not have firework PSAs in Matrix? Thankfully it's just something loose that she's able to fix, but I was expecting her to walk up to it and get massively fucking injured from being blasted. Like, good lord, girl. I'm almost upset that that wasn't the choice, to be honest, but that's only because I love the constant reminder that this girl's brains are non-existent. Because Jesus Christ, like, I'm sure we've all seen at least one of those firework PSAs where, like, somebody walks up to it and just, like, dickhead. But she gets the activator sorted and finds a spot in the lab where she's likely to have a good cover when the blast does go off, and the explosion leaves the room smoky, with the heat really setting off the injury she's obtained, you know, when she was kidnapped. But she powers through. Clammy hands and heart racing, she manages to get the egg out, along with herself obviously, headed to the meeting point with Lee. As she does so, the second set of preset bombs go off, a major reason she needed to get out there as quickly as she did, not least of all, you know, because of the risk of getting caught. She makes it onto the roof, but there doesn't seem to be any sight of Lee until Rota's word above me. My immediate fear that it was one of Petra's helicopters called to the incident. I was sure that they would arrive soon, but this was not one of them. This was something I wasn't even sure how to describe. It was a bizarre hybrid aircraft. Its body was a large motorcycle, long enough to fit 4 people. Above it, fixed to a thick pole that ran down the centre of the motorcycle, were spinning rotors, and on either end of it, where the wheels should have been, there were 2 square wooden boxes, big enough to fit 2 men. I figured some kind of balancing mechanism. Sitting on the seat and clutching the handles was Lee. He was twisting the latter to navigate the aircraft. I can't lie, I think that's cool as hell. Does it seem like Scrap Heap Challenge meets Da Vinci? Yes, but I think that gives it a sense of charm. Where in God's name should I drag up Scrap Heap Challenge from? How old am I? Regardless of that, I did just look it up, and there is a series on Channel 4, so I know what I'm doing this evening. Also, the boxes being big enough to fit 2 men is very on the nose, as we're about to find out. Not necessary. There needed to be a better way for you to phrase that. It's very poor foreshadowing. It's a bit too on the nose. But she gets on the copter bike and hands the egg to Lee, who pops it in the basket at his feet. And with that, they're off. So long, Petrus. So long. And it really is. They're on the way back to the motherland, egg in hand. Well, basket. We do not hear about Vigo again, so we can only assume that he's fucked. The dog's been left behind as well, but things are now about to take a wild turn as we get to the end, so let's plough on. We're nearly there now. Chapter 34. When I realised we were headed straight for Queen Rena's palace, I asked, "Are you going to finally tell me what's in the egg or not?" "Not," Lee replied, clipped. "I don't have permission. That doesn't change because we've crossed borders. You'll have to ask the Queen, or Alistair, see if they'll reveal it to you. Alistair will have the key, and no doubt he'll want to verify the egg's contents are intact." I ground my teeth. After everything I'd been through, I felt I was owed an explanation. I would ask Alistair when I next saw him. Honestly, I'm with her. Like, she's put her life on the line more than once here. I'd at least want to know what I'd been risking it all for at the end of all that too. Also, I was so sure at this point we were headed for disappointment with this fucking egg. Either because the contents themselves were going to be ridiculous, or I figured we might not actually find out. Lee asks Violet to stay with the egg and the copter bike as he tells her he needs a private word with the Queen and Alistair. This felt immediately suspicious to me. While we do know that Vigo was left behind and was still likely to take the fall as planned, something told me that maybe he wasn't the only one being set up. While this isn't quite true, there's something in it. Lee has only become more and more dodgy as the book has gone on, and that is about to reach a nasty conclusion. After a short while, Lee returns and tells Violet that she can now go to see them. He'll fetch the egg after her. I continued and stopped outside the first door on my right. It was half open. I knocked briefly before stepping inside a warmly lit library bordered by towering cherrywood bookcases. My eyes fell on the round table in the centre of the room, surrounded by high-backed chairs. I could make out the Queen and Alistair sitting next to each other, backs toward me. I approached the table and circled it to greet them, only to lay eyes on two corpses. Their heads lolled over their chests, their backs slumped, their fronts drenched in blood. Etched across their throats were wide, still oozing gashes. A blood-stained knife lay in front of the bodies, a few centimetres away from a message that had been scratched into the wooden table surface. For the boys of Matris. So my initial thought when Lee went for that chat was that Violet was chosen because she'd be easy to set up, like chosen for the mission. And I thought that was what was about to reach a conclusion. I certainly did not see this coming. He was sketchy, but still, this was a fantastic twist. And that message on the table seals that Violet will be the one to take the fall, given her past. This is Lee's decision, however, not what I thought, which was like the royal decision. We still do not know the truth of the Northern Mines and the Marked Boys, so this is a guaranteed way to make sure he can get away and leave Violet behind. But she's not going down that easily. She runs back to the roof where Lee is just about taking off in the copter bike, but she is not going to let him get away. Adrenaline then took over, his aircraft still being within reach. I lunged forward and with a jump I'd hardly thought I was capable of, I grabbed hold of one of the bars that lined the aircraft's undercarriage, just 3 seconds before it crossed the roof's perimeter. Thrust over a sheer drop of over 13 floors, I fought to maintain my grip on the bars as the aircraft dipped with my weight. A fight ensues with the two of them trying to maintain control of each other and the craft itself. It's a good back and forth, but only one of them can come out on top. I heard the scraping of his second boot against the motorcycle's uneven metal floor. He was sliding. Then he was shrieking. He was falling past me, way past me, down, 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 and then, within the blink of an eye, he was lying spread-eagled on the pretty brick patch that ran through the Queen's back garden, rigid and still. Oh, you thought we'd end this book without adding to Violet's kill count? Of course not. That's 4 under her belt, confirmed. Yes, they're all a matter of self-defense, but Jesus Christ, well, who knows if anyone, got caught up in that bomb blast, but that's as much, if not more, a Lee thing than her. So definitely 4, maybe 5 with the guy that she tackled the kidnapper, and then she set off a bomb blast as well, so Chapter 35. Violet's mind, even with the Manuxpan still in her system, is an absolute cacophony of fuck, which is absolutely fair enough, to be honest. She is trying to pilot an absolutely insane piece of equipment. She has no idea where she's going or what she's supposed to do, and the leader of her country has just been murdered in cold blood alongside the woman's advisor. She steadily figures out how to keep this mad vehicle moving, and her mind turns to Lee's backpack and the egg. Either they're somewhere on this bike, or they crash down somewhere on palace grounds alongside Lee's body. She's able to stand up and check the compartment below her seat, where she manages to find the backpack, tins of food, bottles of water, guns, knives, aerosol spray for some creatures in the green, clothes, a torch, a breathing mask and some gloves. This man was prepped, and as the aerosol spray would tell you, he was headed for the green. She then checks the backpack itself. Inside there are a couple more bits of equipment that he'd need for his travels, like a compass for example. There's also a pair of photographs. On one is the message etched on the table that we saw, and the other is "For the men you will deceive," which is scratched into the windscreen of a golden sedan, likely that of Patris' king. Questioning what any of that means, her mind goes to the conversation she had with Vigo. Her only hope that he was wrong, and that the Marked Boys, like her brother, are not given a death sentence. Inside the bag is also a letter. I won't read the whole thing, but I'll read a couple of key points from it. Desmond, I regret what I will have to do. To Violet Bates, the criminal, Chris Patton, the engineer, Duncan Friedman, the arms specialist, Seb Morrissey, the camera technician, Jacob Venn, the immigration officer. But when we have the egg and its key, I will remember that each served their purpose. Sacrifices must be made. I imagine the Führer I will have created in both nations tonight. I can't be sure that King Maxon will be killed, but Petra's prize lab will be shaken, and on Matra's side, the Queen and Alistair will be wiped out, and neither nation will have the egg. And this is the next quote. As I've sensed Violet beginning to get more out of control, however, it's been important that I rein her in. She is still of use to me, and I need her obedience. I've tried to command it with affection, albeit half-heartedly. That's had no effect on her. I've had to control her by other means, like monitoring her with a tracker, and I'll feed her a pill. I think that will be needed in order for the night to run smoothly. Patras believes me to be a Patreon. Matras believes me to be a Matrion. They don't know that I belong to neither. I am a man of no nation. Him playing both sides like this just makes a lot more sense than my initial assumption when I was reading it for the first time, that he was only playing Matras. As I said way back in the beginning, this is the moment where it's like, oh right, yeah, no, he has literally told us from the start, he is a man that belongs to neither side. Like, when he started getting more obviously dodgy, which is also clearly when he was writing this letter, I assumed that if he was playing games, this would just be an anti-Matrian sentiment. Forrest will go back to this a little later, but we literally learned when we met him that he was born on the river itself to a Matrian mother and a Patrian father. And this is wrapped up so brilliantly. She played with the characterization here, just, oh, brilliant. And none of this redeems him, to be clear, and that isn't something that happens in these last few pages, but it does bring things into clarity quite nicely. But you know what the most important thing is inside that backpack? Egg. And Violet has the key. The keyhole was near the base. Attempting to still my hands, I managed to insert the key onto the hole and twist it clockwise. It moved 270 degrees before stopping. There was a click and then a smooth crack appeared around the centre of the egg. Drying my hands of perspiration against my ripped dress, I eased open the egg's lid and stared. Only the top half of the silver casing would unlatch, and I lifted it to expose a second, smaller egg that fit snugly inside. Its walls appeared to be made of some kind of extremely thick glass, and within it swirled a sack of liquid. The sack's wall was thick, spongy and transparent. It stuck flush to the glass like it had been glued there. The liquid's texture was gooey and semi-transparent, its colour brownish amber. I touched the exterior with my finger. It was warm, shockingly warm. The very bottom of the egg was taken up by a black plate whose base was concave to fit the shape of the egg. I guessed it was some sort of temperature controlling device. Shining my flashlight directly through the murky liquid, I spotted something else. It was small, smaller than the centre of my palm. It looked like an embryo. So in a grand display of, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck, the egg is an egg. I don't know what we were expecting, but yeah, the egg is an egg. We don't get any other info on it by the end of this book, but I can only assume this will become a major aspect later down the series. Like, maybe this is somehow linked to the Matrion boys or something. I don't know, I'm just spitting ideas out fully knowing that I'm not going to read past this, like I don't care enough. The boxes on either end of the motocopter begin to creak and unprompted burst open, and falling to the floor are the three men mentioned in that first part of Lee's letter alongside Violet. So Violet isn't the only one with a kill count, but in this case there's no real chance of redemption here. She makes a decision to head north, even though that means heading through the green. Even if she never sees her brother again, she needs to know the truth. But whatever I ended up doing, and however I ended up doing it, there was one thing I knew for certain. From this moment on, like Lee Desmond Bertrand, I had to be a player of my own rules. No longer a pawn in someone's game. And with that, we are done. So let's get on to final thoughts. The ending here is clearly set up for more, which I don't really have any kind of major issues with, though having zero answers as to the fate of her brother is kind of annoying, given that it's him trying to escape that literally kicked off all of this. I can't say I'm invested quite enough to read any further, though I can't say that would have been the case had I read this when I was much younger. There's a fair chance I would have been able to look over a lot of the stuff that annoys me now as an adult reader with a lot more life and reading experience under my belt. But let's give a quick roundup of my more general thoughts, because, you know, we've been here a while. Let's, surmise everything. Forrest is good at creating characters that are consistent and pretty well rounded. However, Violet is very hard for me to like, because unfortunately she's a little bit too dim for me to be able to want to follow. She has her bright moments, but it tends to only come up when it's convenient for the plot. The writing on a more technical level is overall fine and often good. There's a major issue of repetition as emphasis being far overused, and early on there's a big overuse of parentheticals, but I wasn't constantly complaining about any of that in the way that I have done with other books, so it's not the end of the world really. Though another complaint I have in that vein would be the constant fucking mention of eye colour. Give it a rest. Bugger me. Oh, it is too much. Genuinely, every time someone's face is mentioned, their eye colour probably is as well. Though there are definite high notes to Forrest's writing. For example, the Vigo/Violet romance was good, and it is what kept me invested more than any other aspect of the plot. And importantly, it was kept at a good level for its reader. Nothing was taken too far, and, it was age appropriate. I think is the best way to put it. The true shining light of Forrest's writing, though, is her fighting scenes. Oh my god, she absolutely kills it every single time, and I was looking forward to seeing them every time. Honestly, my only complaint is that some of them were a little short, but that's just me being, selfish. Like, the match we have where it goes on for 2 rounds, perfect for me. We had 2 major reveals at the end, and I only know how I feel about one of them. Everything about Lee was done really well, and it was led to really naturally. The egg, though, I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, the big egg contained a little egg. It makes sense, I guess, but it does sort of rely on me wanting to read more, and unfortunately, I don't. But that's it for the first Bad Rep Book Club of 2025. There probably won't be too many of them, but that's just because it takes ages. And honestly, as books go in the series, this one was good. It clearly wasn't just a cash grab on the dystopian trend, or if it was a case of, hey, this is trending right now and I want to write something in this series, in this genre. I think it was just that. It's like, hey, this is popping off right now. I have an idea and this is a good time to publish it. Do you know what I mean? Right time, right place, rather than it being an intentional, I want to make money off something popular. I would not begrudge somebody for enjoying this book at all, but it's not for me. I can say that much. And quite literally, it's not, but also a lot of adults enjoy a lot of teen fiction, and I enjoy some stuff that's written for younger readers. I've been saying as much with the graphic novels I've been reading recently. Apart from with graphic novels, I don't tend to go explicitly for a lot of teen and YA fiction. It's more, especially with novels, that I struggle with really spending time with that, because it's just this writing, I need a little bit more complexity sometimes, or I need a little bit of something that I can sink my teeth into. But and I think that's what I'm going to be looking for now, because I have been reading so many graphic novels and short fiction while I've been reading this. I am looking forward to sinking my teeth into something again, something I can actually spend my time with this. So it's going to be nice. But right now, I'm going to go take a nap, because the script was 30,000 words. I think it's taken me about 3.5-4 hours for me to read this. So if there are any books that you think should be in the Bad Rep Book Club, let me know in the comments below. Or if you're still watching at this point, Just put your favourite emoji down there to let me know you're still watching. Feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and feel free to ring that notification bell. All the cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.